You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. The Wisconsin AFL-CIO is calling for rallies at the state capitol in Madison Tuesday and Wednesday to protest more anti-union legislation. A bill attacking automatic paycheck deduction of union dues and union shops is being fast-tracked through the GOP-controlled legislature Tuesday. The so-called Right to Work bill bans contracts between private businesses and unions to deduct union dues from the paychecks of all workers covered by collective bargaining agreements. The Wisconsin Contractor Coalition, a group of more than 330 companies, is joining unions opposed to this attack on union funding. The coalition's Stephen Lyons says when unions are reduced, it can hurt business need trained and skilled workers.
Currently, members' dues are used to build training and state-of-the-art facilities. If you enact Right to Work, these are training facilities that may disappear. One of the coalition members are some of the road builders. I mean, we want safe bridges and safe roads. This is a coalition of private sector businesses working with private sector unions, and this is a situation that has worked for over 100 years. So I just think we're trying to fix something that's not broken.
In 2011, just before he attacked public sector worker union rights, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker was recorded telling right-wing Wisconsin billionaire Diane Hendricks that he would use divide and conquer to first go after public workers and then do right to work. That set off massive protests in 2011. During those protests, Walker took a call from a prankster he thought was billionaire David Koch. Here's the fake Koch chortling over Walker crushing public workers and Walker's response.
Well, I'll tell you what, Scott. Once you crush these bastards, I'll fly out to Cali and really show you a good time.
All right, that would be outstanding.
In the WIN Sports Minute, Mitch Lawrence weighs in on NBA player trading.
No less than 39 players moved to new teams. That amounted to a record for one day of trading in the NBA. Who won? Well, Miami and Detroit certainly improved their. This morning for LeBron James' departure for Cleveland last summer scored a major coup by getting Goran Dragic out of Phoenix. The Pistons also upgraded their point guard spot with the addition of Reggie Jackson from Oklahoma City. And then there were the notable non-moves. Phil Jackson and the Knicks didn't get anything major accomplished, so there's still a lot of building to be done in New York, which has the worst record in the NBA. But here's all you need to remember from the busiest deadline day we've ever seen. The elite teams in the NBA stayed pat. Golden State, the leaders out west, did nothing. Memphis stayed the course, and the defending champion Spurs remained intact. Over in the East, the Hawks, Bulls, and LeBron's Cavaliers also stood back and watched the rest of the league revamp their rosters. In the end, all the trades didn't change the landscape. The best teams will still be the ones to beat when we start the playoffs in late April. From the Sports Minute for Workers Independent News, this is Mitch Lawrence.
This report made possible in part by the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
West side, people don't surrender. They've been down, but they still rise on. Oh, and this time is my time. All right, love or hate, it don't matter. So I'm gonna stand and fight. This time is my time. She got her ups and downs, but love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause this is my town.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. This is it. This is the big day. I mean, tomorrow, I'm told, Wisconsin passes right to work. Here in Pennsylvania, the assault on workers in full gear, paycheck destruction on the menu. You know who's not sitting at the table? The workers who are going to be eaten by our corporate class. Lots of this stuff to talk about today. The reality is this is what I've been saying for a number of years. We're getting to the point where the corporate class hath taken it all and they want more. And, you know, the reality is, look, I've been saying this for years. Now that the wealth class has their media echo chamber, they have their education echo chamber, they have their political machine all fine-tuned and well-oiled. What's that mean for the rest of us? Well, that means that recovery that has gone on, that you and I haven't participated in, it's going to continue to recover. We're just, again, not going to participate in it. And over the weekend, I got a number of emails from folks who said, look, Elizabeth Warren. And look, I love Elizabeth Warren. Problem is we need another 20 Elizabeth Warrens in the Senate. We need 100 Elizabeth Warrens in the House. We need everyday average working class people in the streets. That's what we need. We need to become a militant class in this country. We need to become a militant group of folks who are going to, you know, just take to the streets. You know, today I was having lunch with a friend and I said, you know, why is it that Pat Brown, the senator out in the Lehigh Valley, why is it that every union member in the Lehigh Valley isn't at his office today? When, as I understand, Senator Brown said he was not going to support paycheck destruction. They call it protection. My backside. Why isn't his office full with militant, angry voters? No answer. The reality is this is us. We need to take the bull by the horns. We need to get out in the streets. It's that simple. And while the Elizabeth Warrens of the world and the Bernie Sanders that I love, while they're out there, you know, saying the message, we need to be the ones who echo it. And over the weekend, you know, like I said, I got a number of these articles about Elizabeth Warren. And evidently, when she was, you know, speaking during a Senate Banking Committee hearing, I guess it was last Wednesday, she read an excerpt of the book An Economy Doing Half Its Job. And what it talked about is what we've talked about on this program for the last decade. There's a social compact. You know, there's an agreement between the very well-to-do and the very poor that, you know what, you can do wildly well, but they can't do horribly bad. That we're going to all somehow move forward together at different degrees, obviously, and that corporations can exist in our country and can make profits off of our labor and off of our consumers if they give a little bit back. And what Warren read from the book, an excerpt that said historically American companies and citizens have tended either to thrive together, as in the boom after World War II, or to suffer together, as in the Great Depression. She said that there was a simple explanation for that. That, you know, everyone did better together or did worse together. There was shared prosperity or shared poverty. Then she says, you know, corporations don't share their profits with workers. This is a problem. She said back in the 80s, you know, quoting from research from this William Lasnik, she said large corporations dedicated less than half of their corporate earnings to the shareholders. So less than half of what profits they brought in went back to the shareholders. The rest went to investing in their business, and the other part of it went to their employees. Bigger wage increases. She says, but from 2003 to 2012, these big companies dedicated 91% of their earnings to shareholders. And you go, is that surprising? No, it's not surprising at all. It's because who are the shareholders? Well, the CEOs and the executive class and all of these very, very well-to-do people. You like to think, well, it's us, the weak workers. We got 401ks. No. You have maybe a kernel of sand, grain, you know, maybe one, while they control the ocean. But that grain of sand that they give us, because we got to hold them, we're in the game, we got skin in the game, has been what they've used to basically screw us over. Because every time there's a bust, what happens? All goes away. So here we are at this time, and profits are going up. The big corporations doing wildly well. Things are fabulous. And I've been saying this for years now. This is what's going to happen. And I've been predicting it for a while because it's what happened after the Depression. The corporations did poorly. They struggled. And everyone tightened the belt. Well, big banks and corporations, they took the belt off. There's no belt left. In fact, they're in stretchy pants. And we're still tightening. We look like one of those women from back in the corset era. And I said, look, once the economy looks like it's turned around, people are going to eventually go, hey, I want some of it. I want some of that prosperity. So what we're seeing right now is what I've been saying for a couple of years now you're going to see, is you're starting to see unions going, hey, workers going, hey, we want to join unions. Hey, we want to bargain for better wages, hours, and conditions. Hey, we've been tightening. There's no more loops left. We want something for our families. So what you're seeing in Wisconsin as they push the no rights at work agenda, and here in Pennsylvania, is you're seeing the corporate class purchased Republican Party doing the bidding of the wealthy in this country. You're seeing the corporate class saying, no, we don't want to give any of it up. And we know that the major tool, the main driver in wage increases are those evil, no good for nothing unions. So we need to destroy those. And that's what you're seeing. And what's interesting to me is, I was reading an article at over at Forbes magazine that pointed out that this is Forbes, mind you, Forbes magazine. Forbes is saying that there's wage theft going on, massive wage theft going on in the white-collared world. And do you know why it's going on there? No union. Because they're too smart for unions. They're them educated guys and gals who, they don't need no stinking union. I'll make my own deal. Thank you very much. And what did they get? Screwed every step of the way. They were so smart, they outsmarted themselves. Because as the article at Forbes points out, you've got the Googles, the Intels, the Apples, the Adobes, the Intuit, these big tech firms who had this backroom deal. Anti-poaching, they called it. I won't go after your people. You don't go after my people, and we keep the wages down. Screw those smart workers. Yeah. Even though we're making gazillions. And you go, dummies, you could have avoided some of that. And you could have had some say in what goes on. But no, you chose, because I'm smart. I went to college. I got me some education. I don't need no stinking union. So then what happens? You got to go through multi-year battles to get a little bit of this illusion that you've gotten a settlement. And it's a $3 billion settlement between all of these big companies. You go, $3 billion sounds like a lot of money. No, not. And the thing is, it's not just them. It's these hedge fund companies. It's all of these big companies who have what? Well, they've got really smart people. They've got an army of lawyers. And they're doing everything they can do to manipulate the law. And where they can't manipulate it, they go in with their politicians and they change it. And we've got this idea about wage theft, and there's just those poor workers. Because what's happening is our wages are stolen directly from their paychecks. Well, you know what? White collar wage theft is changing the entire market. So this idea that there's a wage fairy out there who's going to sprinkle wage increases down on top of us doesn't exist. The invisible hand of the market, the invisible hand's been giving us the finger for years. And these people are the ones who manipulate the invisible hand. Yet we're still not getting it. And I think, you're starting to see smart people going, hey, maybe that union thing's important. Maybe we need to be doing that. Which is why you're seeing all these anti-worker bills being pushed through, why you're seeing the no rights at work, why you're seeing the paycheck destruction, why you're seeing all of this attack on workers' rights to collective bargaining. Because the wealth class knows the only way that they're going to have to give up any of their gains off of your labor is if you organize, come together in a group, and you demand it. And then you're willing to go on strike for it. You know, the reality in this country, we used to strike. In the 1980s, there was an average of 75 strikes each and every year. Now you're what? I think there were 10, 11 last year. In 1979, you had 21 million workers in labor unions. Last year, it was down to just over 14 million, even though our population has expanded dramatically since then. I'm telling you, folks, now is the time we need to be organizing together, not being allowed to be pulled apart and not being legislated apart. Not saying, and this is the part that gets me, we're free. We believe in individual rights. We believe in liberty of contract. Yet, no, you can't contract with your employee. It's illegal. That's what they want. Sad stuff. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Bill, we're going to talk about the paycheck destruction bill. Rick Bloomingdale, president of the Pennsylvania AFL-CIO, is going to be here. Quick break. Right back.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1940. And in a hotel room in New York City, Woody Guthrie penned the original lyrics of his song, "This Land Is Your Land." The song was not recorded at Folkway Records until 4 years later. Born in Oklahoma, Guthrie crisscrossed the United States, writing songs about the struggles of working people and the poverty he observed. He became one of the most important social commentators of his day. One of Woody's best-known songs, "This Land Is Your Land," was a response or a retort to Irving Berlin's "God Bless America." That popular tune crowded the airwaves in the 1930s, and Guthrie felt Berlin's song did not adequately capture the experience of the common man. He felt it ignored the discrepancies in wealth and opportunity he observed in his travels. Guthrie sarcastically called his new song "God Bless America" for me, before renaming it "This Land Is Your Land." Guthrie's original recording included these lyrics.
There was a big high wall there that tried to stop me. Sign was painted, said private property, but on the back side it didn't say nothing. This land was made for you and me.
But the studio didn't release this version of the song. During the late 40s and 1950s, artists were often censored for anything that could be labeled as having a communist undertone. The song, including its more radical verses, became a staple for folk singers, especially Pete Seeger. It remains a favorite song at labor rallies to this day. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and the Rick Smith Show.
Your land, and this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you and me.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Hillary Tone. Former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani used a Fox and Friends appearance to defend his recent claim that he does, quote, not believe that the president loves America. Let's take a listen.
In his rhetoric, I very rarely hear him say the things that I used to hear Ronald Reagan say, the things I used to hear Bill Clinton say about how much he loves America. I do hear him criticize America much more often than other American presidents. And when it's not in the context of an overwhelming number of statements about the exceptionalism of America, it sounds like he's more of a critic than he is a supporter.
Giuliani's comments fit into a long-term pattern of Fox News hosts and guests campaigning to smear Obama by portraying him as insufficiently proud of America. But his claim was particularly tone-deaf, coming just one day after President Obama celebrated what he called America's unique strength and perseverance. Nonetheless, Giuliani doubled down instead of apologizing. During a later appearance on Sean Hannity's radio show, he even invoked 9/11 to reinforce his earlier claim that President Obama doesn't love America. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Standing tall against a multinational corporate agenda. The Rick Smith Show.
Walker is Mubarak, Madison, Cairo, fascism track, next stop Ohio. Trying to kill labor, that's their jihad, huh? What's gonna happen when the people all rise up? Sad thing is, so we all labor. What you expect to hear? Billionaires on the papers. Mr. President, Mr. President, Mr. President, Mr. President, Mr. President.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show.
Mr. President, you're wrong. This is a national issue.
Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So it's a jihad, isn't it? This assault on organized labor, this assault on unionized workers, it's a jihad. I mean, honestly and truthfully, I call it what it is. This is a fetish. This is an obsession, and it's all about more for them and less for you, less for you and your families. It doesn't get any simpler than that. And, I was just reading a Bloomberg article over the weekend as well. That said, as the rich get richer, unions are poised for a comeback. And my first thought was, not if the wealth class can have anything to do with it. Not if the Scott Wagners of the world here in Pennsylvania and the Scott Walkers of the world in Wisconsin. Not if the billionaire class of this country has their way and the money. I've said, a number of times, the mission accomplished banner with George Bush's head, you should just put the Koch brothers on there. Mission accomplished. They got everything. They've gotten everything they've wanted. Everything they've paid for. And, at lunch today, I was talking about my grandfather, who always said, and I've said on this program 1,000 times, if a rich guy's going to take a buck out of his pocket to tell you don't need something, you better spend two to get it. It's pretty simple. Because they understand return on investment. What for the Koch brothers is the return on investment? These are billionaires. These are people who are going to spend $1 billion in an election cycle, and that's a year's worth of wealth, maybe. What are they going to get back for it? That's the question. And when you follow the money, you go, this is really all about the money. It's all about the power and the control and the money. And as more states, because look, without Governor Tom Wolf, without Pennsylvania at least having some rational thought and getting rid of Corbett, and I think it was more, I think it had a lot to do with the Jerry Sandusky thing and how bad Corbett was. But if we have another term of Corbett, Pennsylvania is Wisconsin. We're a right-to-work state. And for all those idiots who go, it's my gun, you better keep it because you're going to be like Jed Clampett out shooting in the back for food. And the thing that bothers me is I don't see the anger. I don't see the outrage. I don't see and maybe it's just that we've been over misinformed. As a society, the smarter we get, the dumber we get. I think back to my grandparents' generation. My grandfather went to the 8th grade. Probably one of the smartest people streetwise you'll ever meet. We've become really book smart and really street dumb. I cannot believe how many people I've talked to goes, those unions don't do anything for me. And then you find out that they work for a contractor of one entity or another where the union actually negotiated their wages. Because without that negotiating power, and this is the important part of this, because if you look at the last 35, 40 years, wages have been declining. And not just for the poor working schlubs who are out there throwing boxes on a shipping dock or swinging a hammer, but for the wealth class, for the middle management people too. If you didn't get downsized out of work or outsourced or computerized, your wages have been falling. And look, all of us are kind of in the same boat. All of us are struggling to get from one paycheck to the next. Now, understand, there's only one way that wages go up. Really, honestly, and truthfully, there's two. If you truly lived in a free market society, which we don't, I wish people would stop because we don't. But if you truly did, if you have a really a skill that's unique to anyone else, and you're fantastic at whatever you do, then yes, you have the ability to negotiate for your wages and a higher wage. You do. But there are very few of those. And I know people like to believe, well, I'm so much better than that guy over there. Nonsense. We can always, engineers, we can find somebody from India, put you out of a job for about 20 grand a year. The way wages go up is by bargaining for them. Sitting down and saying, this is what your profits are. You're doing well. We're the ones who made you that wealth. We should be doing well as well. And it's that contract that I talked about earlier, this social contract, this idea that we're all in this together, wasn't something that, that honestly and truthfully corporate America wanted. This idea, this benevolent employer, the benevolent billionaires, they don't exist. They want more for themselves and, well, nothing for you. If they can take it all, they will. And the guy who's the CEO of Caterpillar said, honestly and truthfully, how much is enough profit? There's never enough. We want it all. We always want more. We always want to strive for more. And labor used to think that way as well. We used to think, hey, you know what? It's our work that creates this. We should be sharing in it. So when corporate returns are fabulous and great, we should have some of that. But how often do you see that? I know some companies do a little bit of profit sharing, so you get a little couple of bucks here or there. But it's not life-changing. I'm talking about a militant working class that says, you know what? When companies do poorly, they always come back and say, oh, time to cut wages. But when they do wildly well, how often do you see time to raise wages? They don't. The only time wages go up is when people demand it. And I look at Walmart, for instance. Walmart said they're going to, I guess they're going to raise their wage to their starting wage up to, or their starting wage, I guess, is going to be like $8 or $9 an hour. And then they're going to raise the floor up to about 10, I guess. And why is that? Why do you think, honestly, truthfully, why do you think Walmart would come out and say, well, we're going to raise the wage of our workers up to this amount? Anybody want to raise their hand, take a guess? Gee, could it be the thousands of people out in the streets and the Black Friday strikes and all of the worker actions and all of the mobilization across this country of workers demanding respect on the job and demanding a wage? Do you think that could have anything to do with it? Possibly just a little bit? Of course it does. That is the only way wages go up, benefits go up, working conditions get better. That's it. Sorry, I know you love to think, oh, the benevolent corporation, oh, we can pass laws, and then we won't enforce them. That'll be wonderful. The reality is you need an active, engaged, educated, militant working class. And we've been lulled to sleep. Honestly and truthfully, as a working class in this country, we've been lulled to sleep. Because the sad reality is if too few of us go to bed hungry at night who can do something about it. And too many of us go to bed hungry at night who can do nothing about it. That's the problem. And the more you look at this stuff, the more you study what's going on, and the more you read what's right out in front of us, the more you realize that John Edwards back in 2004 was dead on. There are two Americas. There's the one that the Koch brothers and their ilk sit in, and then there's the one that the rest of us toil and fight and bicker and complain and kill each other over. And that pie's dwindling every day. I go back to Elizabeth Warren. 91% of the revenue brought in, of the profit brought in, went back to the shareholders. And who are the shareholders? They're the Koch brothers and their ilk, the Adelsons and the rest of them. The Diane Hendricks. They're the people on the Wall of Freedom at the Bush Presidential Library who nobody would tell me how much it cost to get on that wall, etched in granite for all eternity. I got to tell you, at some point, we've got to be the ones taking it to the streets. We've got to be the ones who are angry about this. And right now, as we speak, the reason Rick Bloomingdale's not here is I'm sure he's he's up on the Hill trying to talk some sense into these Republican senators who are poised to pass this paycheck deception, which would make it illegal. Understand this when I tell you this. It would be illegal for an employee to negotiate with the employer, which is the state in this case. And eventually they want to bring that down to every worker. They want to make it illegal for them to come to an agreement on something that costs nothing. Think about that for a second. Let it sink in. The people of smaller government, less intrusive government, believe in the free market. Let the invisible hand work. They want to make it illegal for the employee and the employer to make an agreement. So even if, now understand this, this is what they're saying. Even if I'm an employee of the state and I want my union dues deducted from my paycheck to pay my union dues, it would be illegal in the state of Pennsylvania because this is what the Republicans want. And their argument is nothing rational. There's no cogent argument to be made. Nothing. Because I've asked, how expensive is it? Well, they don't know. Why don't you know? Well, because to do a study, a cost analysis would cost us more than it actually costs. This is Machiavellian politics at its worst. Or best, whichever way you look at it. This is pure political payback. This is pure doing the bidding of the wealth class of this country. And as a working person in this state, you should be appalled, you should be outraged, and you should be thinking, hey, next voting cycle, there's some people got to go. To me, it's that simple. That simple. Doesn't get any easier than that for me. I'll take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We gotta get organized. We gotta do it today. No more mindless confusion. No more disarray. We gotta get organized.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Some say the blast sounded like a bomb and felt like an earthquake.
Another day, another oil explosion, this time at Exxon refinery in California.
The intelligence assessment describes some anti-pipeline and anti-oil sands activists as violent extremists.
Anti-petroleum activists are a security threat, says Canada. January 2015, the second hottest January on record. Plus,
the best idea we ever had. Our belief that the country's most special places should belong not just to the rich, not just to the powerful, but belong to everybody.
President Obama designates 3 new national monuments.
All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Just one more day of oil in trouble.
Yep. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, earlier this week we reported there were 2 oil train derailments in North America. We need to issue a correction. In fact, there have been 3 in the past week.
Yes.
And just as I predicted, by the way, as the fire is still smoldering in West Virginia from that huge oil train explosion out there, Keystone XL pipeline proponents are once again claiming that this is why we need to build the pipeline. Here's Fox News, of course.
Proponents of Keystone XL say their pipeline would get oil to market cheaper and far safer than the trains.
Now, in fact, oil transport by train has exploded in this country, pardon the pun. Back in 2008, there was only about 10,000 train cars. Now, as of 2014, about 500,000 of these oil train cars are crisscrossing the country. So, wouldn't it be safer to build the pipeline?
No, you're right. Oil train traffic has increased 4,000%. But as far as total amount of oil spilled, pipelines still spill about 3 times more.
So even though shipment by oil bomb train has boomed over the past 6 years, as far as the environment goes, pipelines are still far more dangerous.
Overall, yeah.
Someone needs to tell Fox News. I'm sure they're waiting to hear it. And speaking of oil explosions, what do you have for us today, Desi?
Well, for the second time in a week, the oil industry was involved in a major explosion and fire near people's homes. A huge explosion on Wednesday destroyed sections of a 100-year-old Exxon refinery in Torrance, California.
How old?
107 years.
And it's still in operation.
Yes.
Giant flames visible for miles, the ground shaking felt for miles as well. An explosion rocked this Torrance refinery, ripping apart structures and crushing cars.
Only minor injuries were reported. 13 schools near the refinery were ordered to shelter in place for several hours because what else are they going to do? Air quality was affected, but officials said it stayed within acceptable limits. The explosion measured the equivalent to a 1.7 earthquake on the Richter scale. The cause of the blast is still under investigation.
Here's the cause. Oil blows up. Just saying.
In Canada, a leaked intelligence memo from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police calls Indigenous tribes and environmentalists who oppose oil and gas development a growing threat to Canada's national security.
The intelligence assessment describes some anti-pipeline and anti-oil sands activists as violent extremists.
The January 2014 report lumps all groups against the oil industry together, describing them as a highly organized and well-financed anti-Canadian petroleum movement.
See, I knew you were a terrorist.
They call them anti-Canadian. Canada's Conservative Harper administration is currently pushing to expand broad anti-terror legislation to include anybody who interferes with, quote, critical infrastructure or the economic and financial stability of Canada, and even allows preventive detention of people who might do something.
It's long been said, when the U.S. sneezes, Canada catches a cold. It sounds like Canada has caught the flu. I'm sorry, Canada.
And disturbingly, that secret memo also questions the science on global warming.
Naturally.
Here in the U.S., the FBI is ramping up monitoring of anti-Keystone XL pipeline activists at their homes and workplaces.
Oh, hello, FBI.
Meanwhile, the planet is still warming. After 2014 clocked in as the hottest year on record, the month of January in 2015 was the second hottest January on record, according to NASA and NOAA.
Those liars.
President Obama this week used his executive authority to protect 3 new national monuments from development for all Americans: Browns Canyon National Monument in Colorado, Hanaolioli Internment Camp in Hawaii, and the Pullman Historic District of Chicago, prompting one congressional Republican to call him King Obama.
Of course he did. As Obama himself noted,
conservation is a truly American idea.
Yeah. Back when we had Republicans like Teddy Roosevelt and, even Richard Nixon.
Yeah, back when conservatives actually believed in conservation.
For much more on those stories and all of them that we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, and iTunes, where we hope you will give us a good review, and that helps other people find our reports easier. Find us and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Is this land made for you and me? This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island. From the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream.
In fact, I was in a meeting in Wall Street, Rick, and it was a pretty stunning meeting because we were talking with them about, how can we get more private investment in infrastructure? And they said, pay us. And you have to pay us not just the cost of the capital, like, $60 million to rebuild I-80. You got to pay us for the profit that we would lose by putting that money elsewhere.
The question, I guess the first question I've got, if this land truly is our land, when the hell are we going to take it back? And the other part of it is, when are we going to learn from all these privatization schemes? When are we going to learn the lessons? When do we finally say enough is enough with stealing from we the people, from screwing work? When are we going to wake up? I guess that's the question. Maybe when we can't afford a Happy Meal, will that be it? Maybe when we can't go to the local, snack and shop or whatever. Is that when it'll happen? Because I'm baffled. I'm baffled that we're still talking about selling off the liquor stores. I'm still shocked. But here we are, back again. Basically the exact same piece of legislation. And today there was a hearing, and in a little bit we'll talk with our Capitol reporter Sean Kitchen about what happened at the meeting. But virtually the exact same piece of legislation that did not pass, did not become law over the last 4 years. I guess it passed the House in 2013, didn't get to the Senate. So this House Bill 790, the exact same thing, nearly identical, that didn't get through the Senate. And who knows with how insane the Senate's gotten, who knows. But here we are back again talking about selling off a state asset, even though we know it's not going to do us any good. Selling it off does us no good. It hurts us. But Jan Murphy over at Penn Live did a pretty reasonable job of going through a couple of points that I think are worth highlighting. As she points out in the legislation, it would allow bars and restaurants and hotels and other eating places to buy permits to sell, up to 24 bottles of beer in no more than 12 packs. And again, I don't know how you enforce this. Okay, I'll buy 12 now, and I'll put them in the car. I'll come back. I'll buy 12, 12 packs. I'll come back. I don't know how you enforce that, but they're saying no cases, so you can buy 24 and 12 packs. Which, okay, the restaurants would, I guess, be able to sell up to 6 bottles of wine for people who had a little. Hey, that was good for dinner. Let's take 6 bottles home. Beer distributors, I just have to think you're dead. Because nobody wants to buy a case. Everybody I know wants to buy a 6-pack or a 12-pack. I know no one who goes, gee, I'd really love to buy a case of beer so I can carry it under my arm and drink it. No, not happening. They did throw the beer distributors a bone by allowing them to be open from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. every day except Sunday. And if you pay $1,000 a year, you can stay open on Sunday too, from 9 to 9. You're still dead though, but hey, at least you'll be able to do this. Beer distributors, another bone thrown to the beer distributors. You'll be able to sell 64-ounce growlers. I don't know what the hell a growler is, but I guess a container of 64 ounces of beer. You'll be able to sell 6-packs and 12-packs with a special permit, but you're still dead. And my first thought was, what, no 40s? Okay, no 40s. Supermarkets, and here's why you're dead, beer distributors, in case you didn't know. Supermarkets will be able to sell wine between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. Also going to be able to sell beer in the same way that they're doing it now by acquiring a restaurant license. So the restaurant tiers are going to be very happy to be able to hawk off their license for big profits. Now, the bill calls for 1,200 wine and spirit license. And they're going to give the beer distributors, I guess, the first crack at them, which, again, I don't understand how the auction works. I don't understand what you're going to pay. What's the going price? I thought there was an auction. So if you're going to allow the people who are beer distributors to auction first, I'm confused. My only thought is that this is the bailout for the beer distributors. This is, we know we've screwed you. We know you're dead. And here's your lifeline. So that you can then take this. Here's the beautiful part. You can then take this bailout that we've given you and basically sell it to a supermarket, and then you can get out of the beer business altogether and go vacation in Florida or Mexico or Aruba or wherever. That's the only thing I can think of. Now, they also say that the Liquor Control Board, the LCB stores, they close over time. And depending on the number of wine and spirits licensed, now here's where this gets fun, because understand me, in big urban areas, in high population areas, you'll see these sucked up, and you'll see, you will see, especially poor areas where you can sell a lot of cheap stuff, have good turnover and make good profit. You're going to see a bunch of these places pop up. It's going to be like Washington. You'll have beer and dry cleaning and beer and back waxing and all kinds of stuff with liquor and back waxing. It's coming. I'm telling you, mark the word. But in areas that no one wants to buy one, the state system will still operate these stores for a short period of time. And it says that the LCB would operate no fewer than 100 stores at any time. So that's going to be in the areas where you would have no consumers, they think. That you couldn't make enough of a profit. Think rural Pennsylvania, the one that they're saying, hey, this is for you. And look, the idea is that these are all designed to lose money. And why? Because you still need a political whipping boy. And here it is. They would eventually get rid of all of the wholesale operation, the money-making part. We would give that off to a Walmart-type company. This is my favorite part. The employees, because there are a lot of people going, well, we'd lose those good-paying jobs. And we would. These are really, really good family-sustaining jobs with healthcare and pension and all those things that I think all jobs should eventually aspire to be. We're destroying those. And in the process of doing that, we're going to throw those displaced workers a bone. You'll get 3 extra points on any civil service exam. So you can go work at the post office that they're trying to destroy, or the police department that they want to privatize, or the fire department that they're going to privatize. Yeah, good luck on that. They would give you a $1,000 a year grant to go back to school part-time, or $2,000 grant to go back to school full-time. And my first thought is, are you kidding me? Where the hell are you going to go to school for $2,000 a year? Think of that one. But beyond that, those jobs never come back, and they're gone. And as a state, again, we lose more jobs. So I'm curious, is anybody in favor of this? Does this sound like a good idea? Oh, and by the way, the Commonwealth Foundation is saying this is going to bring in more money to the state. I'm still trying to find out how. When you're going to give up that 1% tax for just paying your stuff on time, I don't know how you make it. I'm sorry, I don't know how you bring in more revenue while you're giving the profit portion away. I just don't. This is a bad idea. And that's not even talking about all of the externalities, of which there are numerous. This is a bad idea. Again, brought to you by corporate people. These aren't Republicans. These are corporatists. These aren't conservatives. These are ideologues. And they're hell-bent on making Pennsylvania Mississippi. And over the last 4 years, they've done a pretty good job of getting us there. Last in job creation. Telling you folks, a lot of work to do. Militancy, my view. Quick break. Right back with Sean Kitchen, our Capitol reporter. Stick around.
Now who'd have thought that after all, something as simple as rock and roll would save us all? Now who'd have thought that after all, it was rock and roll?
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in Two. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. 13 years ago today, the European Union imposed sanctions on a number of Zimbabwean leaders, including President Robert Mugabe.
In the early 2000s, like 2002, 2003, we had serious cases of abductions, disappearances, political violence, and organized violence.
Arthur Gwagwa is the international liaison of the Zimbabwe Human Rights NGO Forum. 3 presidential elections later, Mugabe is 90 years old and still in power, and those sanctions have essentially been lifted. But why? The situation in Zimbabwe isn't much better than it was 13 years back, but Mugabe has changed the tone of his rule. For instance, human rights groups can now operate in Zimbabwe and file court petitions, but they can't help organize demonstrations.
The right to freedom of association is useless unless it is accompanied by right to freedom of assembly. What the government is doing is not new, because a lot of governments or illiberal governments across the world, they are changing their tactics from covert violence to other overt forms of human rights violations.
Gwagwa says EU sanctions missed their target by putting a premium on symbols of democracy instead of true democratic reform.
They are never tired of holding elections. They hold elections. What they simply do is to make sure that the elections are zombie elections, to give a semblance of order to the outside world.
The EU renewed a travel ban and asset freeze on Mugabe and his wife today, but those are the only remaining elements of those sanctions. And with Mugabe recently selected as the chairman of the African Union, there's even a carve-out for his official travel. So instead of being ostracized by the rest of Africa, Mugabe's stock is high on a continent where Gwagwa says relationships are often more important than principles. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Good news, people. The boom is back. Good times are here again, thanks to an economic boom generated by, of all things, bad times. Tens of millions of Americans have been knocked down and held down in recent years by the collapse of jobs and wages. This calamity has led to a second blow for millions of the same families who now find themselves buried in overdue bills for credit card charges, student loans, and other consumer debt. But there's a bright silver lining in that dark financial cloud. Only it's not for the indebted families, but for a booming breed of finance hucksters known as consumer debt buyers. Believe it or not, in the warped world of high finance, there's gold in them thar hills of bad debt. Such miners of human misery as Encore Capital Group buy bales of unpaid bills from banks and other lenders, paying pennies on the dollar. Then they unleash packs of their hard-nosed, aggressive collectors on the families. If they still can't extract payment, the debt profiteers turn to their meanest dog, the courts. Debt firms routinely file thousands of lawsuits a day against financially devastated Americans. They know that most debtors can't understand the legal gibberish in the suits, can't afford a lawyer, and can't mount an effective defense against the corporate lawyers. So, some 95% of these lawsuits produce default judgments against hapless borrowers, meaning debt buyers can then confiscate the wages of borrowers or freeze their bank accounts. This is Jim Hightower saying this boom in vulture capitalism is disgusting. But worse, it's subsidized by us taxpayers. We pay for that judicial system, the judges, courtrooms, and endless rounds of hearings. Predatory debt corporations have perverted our so-called justice system into their own subsidiary for squeezing profits out of destitute debtors.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Yeah, I think we do. Honestly, I think we know who the enemies are. They're the ones who have the R's behind their names, all the politicians who are, and not all of them. Look, there are a couple. There are a couple rational, reasonable Republicans left. Not many. They're being homogenized out of the party. This has been a 30, 40-year journey. And now the corporate class has got it, man. They've got the privateers all in line, the corporatists all in line. And what's ours will soon be not even theirs. It'll be the wealth classes. They're just the useful idiots in all this. And it's amazing to me. Anyway, here to talk a little bit about what went on today, because today was hearing day on the wine and spirits shops. Our Capitol reporter, Sean Kitchen. Sean, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick.
So the big wine and spirit hearing, I got to think this was kind of a kangaroo court. It's to show that, hey, we did our due diligence, but at the end of the day, the ideologues are going to go the way the ideologues are paid to go, much like they did last time.
Yeah, it wasn't pretty much a hearing. All the people who voted for it were the party line vote 15-10, and the only people who had questions for today's hearing or meeting, whatever you want to call it, were the Democrats who voted against it. Not a single Republican raised any issues coming in. They might chimed in a couple of times with stuff like to clarify on issues what's happening in Washington State, but not a single question or concern was brought up from any of the Republicans in today's agenda or meeting.
Okay, so why do we have to do this? Why is this so important? Are the constituents clamoring for privatization?
Well, it beats me. I mean, I think this is a pet project that Mike Terzai wants to do. He's been chasing his white whale for the past three sessions now.
That's good. His white whale.
Yeah, this is his white whale. No, I mean, a couple years ago in 2011, he wanted $2 billion. That didn't go anywhere. Now they're talking about $1 billion for this. And honestly, I don't know how they're going to get it. That they said today was going to raise $1.1 billion, but if you're there, it was just, yeah. It was
so my question, Sean, is which orifice did they pull that out of?
I don't know. I think the backside.
I mean, because if I remember right, and help me here, but if I remember right, when they first came out with this, when it first broke, it was like $6 billion they were going to be able to raise, and it was going to solve it was going to cure cancer and solve climate change. It was the end all, do all, fabulous thing. And then when someone said, well, where'd you get that? Immediately they cut it like down to 4, and then it was down to 2, then it was down to 1.7, 1.5, 1. And then eventually they just said, well, core function of government. Government shouldn't be doing this. So now we're back up to 1.1 billion. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I was doing some research for my article that'll be published later on, and Matt Brias from the Commonwealth Foundation a couple years ago called this guesstimates. They're just taking guesstimates on what's doing. So the organization or the interest group pushing this, the $2 billion estimate they had out there a couple years ago was just a guesstimate. Now we're down to $1 billion. So they cut in half within 2 sessions.
So how are they getting this? Are they putting a price tag on it? Is it because I originally thought it was an auction. They were going to have these up. People were going to auction them off, and the highest bidder would get them. Are we just going to put a price tag? Is that how they came up with this?
I guess so. That's what they're asking for. But how are you going to do this when you're going to be selling? I think most of this is going to be through selling the licenses left and right. But then, how are you going to get rid of these stores in some parts of Philadelphia, or when the land value is so low? There's going to be more stores that are going to be worth more money than other ones. How are you going to get rid of them? Are you going to have assets sitting around? And one of the issues that Costa brought up today was that this won't help us at all for another 2 or 3 years if we were to get any of the money in. So this will not go towards our structural budget deficit this year or next year, and probably even the third year down the line.
So let me go back to what you just said here for a second. Because it didn't dawn on me. It really didn't pop into my head about all the land that the state owns that's in this. The license. See, I'm thinking the license is just a license. You get a license and you go find a place to have your store, and you then do it. Would the license include the property? Is that, or has no one figured that out yet?
I don't think I haven't dug into this bill. I mean, it's like almost over 100 pages long. But what they were talking about today is the first people who get the license will be the beer distributors. They get the first dib at it for the year.
Right.
And that, from working in the beer distributor for the past 2 years and going around different places, there's no way that can happen. Shelf space, selection of beer is going to be cut down dramatically. And a lot of places just aren't large enough to do that. So where is it going to go? Who's going to be popping up stores left and right? And a couple of Philadelphia representatives probably see this, because you see how small beer distributors are. It's going to be corner stores. There's going to be nuisance bars popping up, and there's going to be more like local, like size, like corner stores. And from what we heard today, actually the Beer Distributors Association, those people, they're against this.
Of course, because they're dead. They got to know they're done. Because I'll tell you right now, Sean, I'm never going to buy a case of beer ever again, because I don't drink a case of beer. It took me 10 years to drink a case of beer. I'm going to go buy a 6-pack. And if it's at the local corner store, if it's the supermarket, that's where the vast majority of consumers are going to go. The case thing, done.
Yeah, and the one thing, I think there's 30 stores in each county. And where some people are worried about, if you get rid of 30, that's going to be 30 licenses in each county. A license in the middle of Cambria County or in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, is going to lose its value compared to a license in Philadelphia or Bucks County. So there's a lot of that type of stuff going on. So people actually aren't going to be able to compete in those areas.
Right. Which is why they kept some of I guess the way it's written, they kept some of the liquor stores open as political whipping boys, but also because there probably won't be anyone. So my other question is if I buy a license in Cambria County or one of the northern tier counties, can I transfer that to Philadelphia?
Probably not,
because it's a state license. Wouldn't it be a state license?
I think it's going to be controlled on the county level.
Okay.
County by county is what they were talking about today.
Right.
And an issue that was actually brought up by the same representative whose family owns a restaurant, I was really skeptical of this, owns an R license, is that this is actually a plan to wipe out the beer distributors, obviously, and bring in these extremely large liquor stores, like the Walmarts of the liquor stores.
Yeah, or just have it at Walmart. I mean, we don't need to bring in a Walmart of liquor stores. We could just have Walmart do it, or the supermarkets, because eventually that's where this ends.
I don't think they want to go towards that, especially with the issues of having people. There's still going to be issues of self-scanning. These supermarkets with the self-scanning lines.
Right.
I think that they want to keep these out of the supermarkets
Okay.
per se, or have a separate area designated for it.
Yeah. Well, it's still there where you'll be able to buy it. Last question. Chances of it passing? About 20 seconds.
I could see it. It's definitely going to pass out of the House. I was talking to a few people inside, a few staffers and legislators in the House. They don't see it being taken out by the Senate anytime soon.
Okay,
this
good.
is something that the Senate's going to be unwilling to take up.
There you go. Sean, I appreciate you taking time for us.
All right, thank you very much. Have a good one.
All righty, quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people on the track.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. The Wisconsin AFL-CIO is calling for rallies at the state capitol in Madison Tuesday and Wednesday to protest more anti-union legislation. A bill attacking automatic paycheck deduction of union dues and union shops is being fast-tracked through the GOP-controlled legislature starting Tuesday. The so-called Right to Work bill bans contracts between private businesses and unions to deduct union dues from the paychecks of all workers covered by collective bargaining agreements. The Wisconsin Contractor Coalition, a group of more than 330 companies, is joining unions opposed to this attack on union funding. The coalition's Stephen Lyons says when union dues collections are reduced, it can hurt businesses that need trained and skilled workers.
Currently, members' dues are used to build training and state-of-the-art facilities. If you enact Right to Work, these are training facilities that may disappear. One of the coalition members are some of the road builders. I mean, we want safe bridges and safe roads. This is a coalition of private sector businesses working with private sector unions, and this is a situation that has worked for over 100 years. So I just think we're trying to fix something that's not broken.
In 2011, just before he attacked public sector worker union rights, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker was recorded telling right-wing Wisconsin billionaire Diane Hendricks that he would use divide and conquer to first go after public workers and then do right to work. That set off massive protests in 2011. During those protests, Walker took a call from a prankster he thought was billionaire David Koch. Here's the fake Koch chortling over Walker crushing public workers and Walker's response.
Well, I'll tell you what, Scott. Once you crush these bastards, I'll fly you out to Cali and really show you a good time.
All right, that would be outstanding.
In the WIN Sports Minute, Mitch Lawrence weighs in on NBA player trading.
Now listen, 39 players moved to new teams. That amounted to a record for one day of trading in the NBA. Who won? Well, Miami and Detroit certainly improved their teams. The Heat, still smarting from LeBron James' departure for Cleveland last summer, scored a major coup by getting Goran Dragic out of Phoenix. The Pistons also upgraded their point guard spot with the addition of Reggie Jackson from Oklahoma City. And then there were the notable non-moves. Phil Jackson and the Knicks didn't get anything major accomplished, so there's still a lot of building to be done in New York, which has the worst record in the NBA. But here's all you need to remember from the busiest deadline day we've ever seen. The elite teams in the NBA stayed pat. Golden State, the leaders out west, did nothing. Memphis stayed the course, and the defending champion Spurs remained intact. Over in the East, the Hawks, Bulls, and LeBron's Cavaliers also stood back and watched the rest of the league revamp their roster. In the end, all the trades didn't change the landscape. The best teams will still be the ones to beat when we start the playoffs in late April. For the Sports Minute for Workers Independent News, this is Mitch Lawrence.
This report made possible in part by the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
So this is not some isolated incident where one governor is just off on his own program. This is part of a national strategy, and they figured they can do it in Wisconsin, they can do it in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Michigan, Ohio, and elsewhere.
Well, people gonna give you hell and take it back in 2012. Hang on, Wisconsin, hang on. Oh, hang on, Wisconsin, hang on.
Well, that was the hope. The hope was that, when voting time came back around, you throw the bums out. But much like here in Pennsylvania, the margins got crazier, and you got to question, what is it folks were voting for? Because I got to be honest, in my view, Walker, this was always the goal. This was always that, and he laid it out. The first step is divide and conquer. If you remember the video with the woman with the all tingly in the panties, when do we pass? Oh, right to work. He said, look, first we got to divide and conquer. This is the first step. You knew this is where we were going to get to, and the folks of Wisconsin had to know in this last election this was going to happen. Or maybe they didn't, which is why I've asked Robert Craig back. He's the executive director of Citizen Action of Wisconsin. Robert, thanks for taking time for us.
Great to be with you, Rick. I mean, great to be with you, not great to be in this situation, of course.
No, I mean, one of the first guests we had on this, you were one of the very first people we had on this back in 2011. You heard the clip there of yourself coming in saying, look, this is a national strategy. This is really the moneyed interest. And, we've been having this conversation for 4 years now. We got it. What happened?
The strategy continues. You're absolutely right. I mean, Scott Walker introduced Right to Work when he was a very young state representative 20 years ago. And the person he promised it to on a tape wasn't just any person. He got taped doing it. It was a billionaire and a large contributor to his campaign. And so this is what the right-wing billionaires, her name is Diane Hendrick, have wanted all along, and what the Koch brothers have wanted. And so all of this, I don't really want it, and we're not gonna be divisive right now. That was all simply like a fake One Direction, a feint, so to speak. And now he's trying to do now what he tried and failed to do with Act 10 in 2011. That is pass something in a week. And so that's what they're up to right now. Try to do the state Senate this week, hearing Tuesday, vote Wednesday, and that's the only house where there's even a relatively close margin. And then in the Assembly next week, probably, and the Assembly has a huge 30-seat Republican majority. So if you're a betting person, he's likely to pull this off and take away the rights of tens of thousands of workers across Wisconsin and continue our race to the bottom, the depression in wages.
Yeah, I was saying back during this last election cycle here in Pennsylvania, as well as other places where I was asked to go, look, all of this, we're not interested in that. It's not a priority. Nonsense. This is the priority. For all of these right-wing governors, this was the priority as the economy recovers and as workers start to go, hey, wait a minute, there are more billionaires and the rich are getting richer and we're still tightening our belt. Let's organize. And this has been the plan to take away that ability to organize.
No, absolutely. And in fact, the State Chamber of Commerce here in Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce, this is their top agenda item, and it has been for decades. And so they're behind Scott Walker, and they were going to get this done no matter what. And this is literally about reducing the leverage of workers and making it possible to pay lower and lower wages. As you know, wages go down for all workers. There's less healthcare coverage, fewer pensions. Workplace safety is much worse, so people literally die at a higher rate in right-to-work states than non-right-to-work states down the line. But it's about taking the one mechanism, the one democratic mechanism workers have to have a voice at work and to balance the huge power of large multinational corporations. And it's been the goal of the right and those corporations for decades to take that away. And this is not, we now have Indiana, Michigan, Wisconsin. This is moving its way through former Union strongholds. So this is a physical representation of the decline of worker power in this country. And you see what that does to the economy and to people's economic opportunity. And obviously, places like Pennsylvania are also at risk if it ever lines up where you have all three, both houses and the governor on the far right, which you had for a while, but fortunately don't right now.
No. I mean, look, had Tom Corbett won re-election here in Pennsylvania, and I got to say that I think it had more to do with. I love Tom Wolf. I think he's a great guy. I think he's a good human being, but I think it had more to do with the Jerry Sandusky situation than it had with Tom Wolf. If we've got a Governor Corbett, Pennsylvania is in the exact position that Wisconsin is in.
Yeah, and quite frankly, you're only going to have strong union movements on the two coasts at the rate we're going, and of course, that's going to harm union workers in those states as well. I mean, this is a concerted strategy to repeal all of the gains since the 1930s, and it really is. I don't want to overstate it, Rick, but it really is like standing here and talking about the Iron Curtain going down, or the Plessy versus Ferguson decision, or Dred Scott decision being made. In other words, we can't stop it in Wisconsin right now, most likely. We have to dedicate ourselves to restoring people's rights, because, quite frankly, people don't forget when their rights are taken away. And the problem here is that we've got to, for all the folks who aren't in unions across America and across Wisconsin, make them understand that their economic struggles and their anxieties are related precisely to how the system is being rigged against them.
Yeah, and the question is, how do you do that when you look at? And I was just earlier in the program, I was just talking about Google and Adobe and the ones who got caught up in this big lawsuit, like $3 billion, which sounds like a lot of money. It's really not when you're talking about these huge tech firms that had this collusion agreement that we won't raid each other's employees so we can keep the wages down. How do you get those folks to finally wake up and go, you're well educated, but well educated people need unions as well, so that you aren't pitted against each other like this? Because the narrative has been, well, those unions are just for those unskilled, uneducated people who can't negotiate for themselves.
Well, the narrative Governor Walker gives is that people just need more skills. Right. This is, by the way, when he makes historic cuts in K-12 education, university system, tech college system. But the idea that everyone is going to be a high-skilled worker and no one else matters is not a way to economic equality or opportunity. You need decent wages at all levels. Of course, you need the ability for people to get more skills and to move up.
Certainly.
But that's just an excuse, right, on their part to blame people for not having good jobs or not having jobs, when in fact the economy isn't offering those opportunities in the first place, and those career ladders where people can go up step by step and build up more skills. And so it's all a cover story for them, because their real goal here is to make labor as weak as possible so they can get the cheapest labor possible. And this is on not just in the United States, but this is on a global scale, pitting workers against each other throughout the globe in order to maximize corporate profits. And my goodness, the conspiracy has worked tremendously well. Corporate profits are at record levels, and income distribution is back to pre-1920s levels and getting worse. We'll be back to the Gilded Age in short order. And this is not because of some natural disaster or some natural change, something we can't control. This is human activity, literally stacking the economy against average people and doing it in a very effective way.
Like I always say, they want to take us back to the good old days of the 80s and 90s and not the 1980s and 90s.
Right.
But, I look at this and I go, what is it about us? What is it about the voting people of this country that look at Scott Walker, who, I remember the big phone call with the fake Koch brother, who everyone knows is in the Koch brother's pocket. What is it about us that would look at them and go, oh, yeah, they've got our interests in mind. This guy cares about me and my family. What does that say about us?
Well, it does say a lot about, the average person, the average voter is not information rich and is living their life, right? The problem, though, is that we used to think that if the focus was the economy, then progressives would win, because clearly they would run bread and butter issues. We're the ones, progressives, that are on their side. That has not been the case the last 30 years since economic insecurity started rising and the labor movement started being taken apart. And part of it is that when people get very anxious, they actually retrench and they actually want to hold on to what they have rather than thinking more broadly. But in addition, the right has provided a clear message that we're going to lower your taxes and we're going to blame other people for your problems. It's those people in the cities, right, that are on social programs that are causing all the problems.
Right.
It's a divide and conquer strategy. And you can fight that, but what you need to do is you need to have a very powerful common sense agenda, common interest agenda, common good agenda that people can actually believe in. And Democrats haven't been nearly bold enough. And the destruction of the legitimacy of government has been one of the main problems, because people don't believe that government can be used as an instrument to better their lives and create more economic opportunity. So when Republicans trash government, say like the Katrina disaster, it actually helps them because it makes people turn away from the idea that we can solve these problems together through our own democracy. So we need to start over again and really convince people, not just their minds, but their hearts, that this is the one thing a democracy can do if we pull together, and that we are as strong a country. We can do as many great things as we did 40 years ago. The problem is us and our idea of what is possible. Our problem is a right-wing ideology that has told us we can't do these things anymore. They have a negative, cynical ideology that simply, when people tune out, they take advantage and they take all the money and they take all the power. And that's been in process for 30 years.
No, they've taken we out of we the people.
Absolutely.
So tomorrow, I understand there's a big rally planned. Are we looking at maybe the next 2011 uprising? What are we expecting tomorrow and the day after?
We just don't know. Of course, the 2011 uprising was unprecedented and was not equal in other states. And it was partly the suddenness and the surprise of it, because it wasn't known really what Walker would be like. And you still had very vibrant public employee unions, which, as you know, were the last bastion in many ways, because the industrial unions had been decimated by NAFTA and GATT and the corporate globalized trade agreements. And so we don't know, now that people think this can't be stopped, and now that the public sector unions have already been decimated, and the industrial unions are not as strong as they used to be. It's completely unclear how large this will be. I think it'll be large, but 2011 is almost like, I don't know. It's a hard standard. That in a way, I'm concerned that it's such a high standard that it'll make it look small no matter how large it is. If you know what I mean. It's like
no, I mean, if you set the standard so high that no matter what you do, it's never going to reach that. So it'll be a failure in the eyes of the media. I already see the headlines tomorrow.
Right. And so it was not done last time based on, I mean, people did all sorts of additional turnout things, but believe you me, you did not do, what would you need? In basic organizing, you need to get you get about half of the people that commit to come. If you got 100,000 people, 200,000 would commit to come on the phone. That didn't happen. People just came, right?
No, we were there.
Yeah, I remember. So it's not really, it's really hard to say. I'm concerned that people have fallen into a kind of fatalism, and so I think it'll be large, but I'm concerned it won't be large enough. Nothing's large enough. We learned that in 2011 to prevent far-right Republicans from fulfilling this promise, and they will move forward no matter what. And so I hope it's very large and it makes a point, but obviously we're probably fighting for the long term here, because we're trying to persuade a brick wall as far as convincing conservative Republicans not to follow their directives on this.
Any chance of the senators running to Illinois again, as they did the last time?
Well, that was because of a quirk in the Constitution that required fiscal policy to have a certain percentage of the vote, and this isn't fiscal, right? And so I don't think, as far as I know, that's not an option. Now, if there's some option B I don't know about, then that's possible. Obviously, they want to keep that under wraps, but it wouldn't be as long. Anything that I've heard about would be more of the order of delaying it a couple days or a week, not delaying it indefinitely like happened in 2011.
So last question I've got for you, and I guess it's more of an opinion or a thought question than anything. Where do you see labor going in the day after tomorrow then? What's the direction?
Well, it has to be rebuilt. Obviously, it was built originally before the Great Depression without any right to have unions, really, right, in terms of labor law. And so it's going to have to be rebuilt from the ground up. And then we are going to have to retake the state. Now, it's very hard with the gerrymandering, so you have to project, if you're being realistic, that you can't get full control again until the 2020s. You might be able to get the governorship and the Senate. It's hard to imagine all three of them, including the state assembly. But you have to build the kind of movement that can create full control, and then you need to have the wherewithal to have a progressive Democratic Party that will restore people's rights. But it's going to be a process where labor needs to get stronger. In some ways, you have to organize. You have to organize all the people in the work sites. In some ways, even though it's very damaging, the union movement in 10 years could emerge much stronger and much more mobilized than before, with a lot more of an organizing than a servicing model. Right. I'm not saying that's a good idea, but I'm saying that's the only course available, and that is a silver lining if it can pull it off.
I've been saying for a while what needs to happen is you need to have the collapse so that out of it comes a more militant union movement, and not just, as you pointed out, the service part of it, but actually the people on the shop floor being like my grandparents' generation were. It wasn't the union, it was our union, and they fought for it, and they fought for and kept everything that they negotiated for because they were that militant, and they didn't look at it as, oh, that's the union doing it for me. No, that's us doing it for ourselves. And I think we need to have that mindset change.
Absolutely right. And I think too many people forgot how hard it was to win these rights in the first place. And that's when you start losing rights.
Yep.
And
but they weren't just given to us. They weren't given to us by benevolent employers and the benevolent billionaire class. They weren't just bestowed upon us.
That is what people, I guess people can only reach so much history. You have to experience it. And then if we have a whole generation that wins its rights back, that's a militant generation that we're going to need in order to rebuild a fair economy and really open up opportunity and create, really achieve the incredible potential of this country, which we're not achieving right now because of really narrow and selfish policies of a narrow elite.
Yeah, and the ideologues that they've bought, like Scott Walker, and here in Pennsylvania, Scott Wagner and his ilk. Robert Craig, I appreciate you taking time for us. I wish you guys the best, and I'd love to have you back as this continues down the road.
Happy to, Rick, and maybe if we can make this bigger, you can come out again.
Yeah, I was trying. I'm trying. Robert, thanks so much, man.
Thank you.
Let's take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Bringing sanity and rational thought back to America. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1940, and in a hotel room in New York City, Woody Guthrie penned the original lyrics of his song, "This Land Is Your Land." The song was not recorded at Folkway Records until 4 years later. Born in Oklahoma, Guthrie crisscrossed the United States, writing songs about the struggles of working people and the poverty he observed. He became one of the most important social commentators of his day. One of Woody's best-known songs, "This Land Is Your Land," was a response or a retort to Irving Berlin's "God Bless America." That popular tune crowded the airwaves in the 1930s, and Guthrie felt Berlin's song did not adequately capture the experience of the common man. He felt it ignored the discrepancies in wealth and opportunity he observed in his travels. Guthrie sarcastically called his new song "God Bless America" for me, before renaming it "This Land Is Your Land." Guthrie's original recording included these lyrics.
There was a big high wall there that tried to stop me. Sign was painted, said private property, but on the backside it didn't say nothing. This land was made for you and me.
But the studio didn't release this version of the song. During the late 40s and 1950s, artists were often censored for anything that could be labeled as having a communist undertone. The song, including its more radical verses, became a staple for folk singers, especially Pete Seeger. It remains a favorite song at labor rallies to this day. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Your land, and this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
At the beginning of the 21st century, the world's most dominant form of conflict and aggression became terrorism. Terrorism is a method of attack that can be used as a means to several different ends. Terrorism is a violent surprise that generally kills innocent non-combatants or non-warring armies. Its basic use is to make a statement such as, "Do as we want or we'll do this again, but you won't know where until it happens." Terrorism's goals can be to scare into submission, to wear down until surrender, or to simply overtake territory by destroying a population. Over the long haul, terrorism has been proven to fail more often than not. Terrorist acts tend to fail because those being attacked stand up to the fear and often organize their own counterattack that is more powerful. Join us again to learn that terrorism is not a recently developed tactic. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
We make Pennsylvania happy!
Standing up to conservatives and corporatists every weeknight. The Rick Smith Show.
So now you see the light. Hey, stand up for your right. Come on, get up, stand up. Stand up for your right. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight.
You know, as I've been saying, look,
Get up, stand up.
no rights are given. You have to fight for them. And, you know, you can write this down. Remember, come 2018, the next gubernatorial election here in Pennsylvania. Write this down because it's going to happen. The reason Pennsylvania is not a no rights at work state, it's because of Tom Wolf. That's it, pure and simple, bottom line. Mark it down. In the event the Republicans retake the governor's mansion in 2018, Pennsylvania is going to be right in this place. And you got to know that the Koch brothers and the moneyed interests know it, which is why a lot of these corporate front groups and a lot of the billionaire front groups are setting up shop here. And you could talk about all the moderate Republicans, and there are still a few decent worker-friendly Republicans. But look, they're few and far between. And understand, they know this as well. They don't fall in line and do what the party leadership wants them to do. The moneyed interest will take them out and homogenize them. It's that easy. And the sad reality is we have been so bamboozled in this country as a working class. We have been misfocused. We have been lied to. We've been bamboozled on every letter. Over here, the shiny thing. Over here. Look over here while we rob you blind. And I met this guy this weekend while I was doing my weekend driving gig. And, you know, I was talking to his buddy, and he goes, oh, this guy's a right-wing gun nut and all this stuff. And the first words out of his mouth are, F Tom Wolf. And now, look, I know Governor Wolf, and I've known him for a number of years now. In doing this program, I've had the opportunity to meet him, and we've had, you know, fairly lengthy discussions on a number of occasions. So, you know, he sees me in a crowd. He comes, hey, Rick, how are you? You know, big hug, all that stuff. I asked the guy, you know, why? Why do you think this? He goes, well, I guess first, what do you think the answer was? Guns. That's right. It was guns. Wolf's going to take my guns. And I'm going, really? The only thing I've ever heard Tom Wolf say about guns is that he believes there should be a universal background check, which I believe in. And what the police departments want is an assault weapons ban. Because you get crazy people with these assault weapons doing a whole bunch of really crazy stuff. And he was of the mindset that, and this is where I think you need to have a militant working class, an educated, activated, militant working class. Because within the matter of about 15 minutes, I had this guy actually thinking and not regurgitating talking points. He was actually thinking about an issue in a way that he had never thought about before. Because he goes, I should have the right to bear arms. I go, okay, well, other than tank tops, what else do you think? Do you think should I be able to own a nuclear weapon? And he said, well, of course not. Within reason. I go, well, immediately you have changed your position to I have the right to bear arms to now I have the right to bear arms within reason. So where does that reason? I think it's reasonable to say that assault weapons are not something that you need to go hunting with. It's not something that you need to protect your home with. In fact, you know, my friends who are policemen say the best thing to protect your home with is a big dog. That's the best thing to protect your home with. And then comes a shotgun. And it doesn't even have to be loaded. All you need is, or you could just get a recording of a shotgun that does that. That makes people go, uh-oh, run. This idea that I need an AK-47 to defend the compound is ludicrous. So once we get on this, we start talking about all of the other things in his life that are important. The fact that he hasn't been able to hold a steady job for a while. He's had a bunch of jobs, doing a bunch of different work, struggling to get by like a lot of people. A good, solid, decent union guy. And he can't understand why he can't hold a decent union job and why the unions are shrinking. And I go, well, the politicians that you vote for are the ones who are destroying your job. They're the ones who are taking your ability away. Don't you on some level see this? And the answer was no. His issue was guns. And the Republicans have taken this, the God, guns, and gays thing, man, and they've blinded the working class of this country in such a masterful way. that it gets us not thinking. We just become issue dumb. Well, where does he stand on guns? I don't care if he's perfect on everything else. If he says universal background check, I'll vote for the guy who's going to chop off my legs. But I'll take my gun from my cold, dead hand. But when you start talking about what reasonable is, there's an opportunity to talk. Now, when I then threw it back out, the NRA is now a fully owned subsidiary of the gun manufacturing industry. And that back, years in the past, the NRA was actually fairly reasonable. They actually advocated for gun owners, not gun makers. And this is the really important part of this. Understand these factioning off, all of these moneyed interests who are trying to move the working class of this country. It's not in our best interest. And this is why I keep saying, at some point we have to take back the message. Average, everyday working people, not Democrats, not Republicans, not working people need to go, you know what? I care about my kitchen table. Yeah, guns. Yeah. Look, I'm not a gun taker, but I do believe in background checks. I don't want crazy people having them. I don't want felons having. I don't want rapists and killers and all that. I don't want that. And I also think weapons of mass destruction, and we shouldn't be handing out, and assault weapons, we shouldn't be just handing them out. Sorry. If you're a collector or one of those things, we can make some exceptions. We can have a rational conversation around that. But just mass producing them and selling them on the street corner, I'm sorry, I'm not in favor of. We need to take back the kitchen table, because we've left the kitchen table nowhere. Which is why, again, for 30 years, we've seen a declining in wages and a massive redistribution of wealth from us that create the wealth to those who they shuffle it from one pocket to another. We got work to do, folks, and lots and lots and lots of it. Quick break. Right back.
Crazy. I'll wait till she betrayed me. Now my vision is no longer hazy. I'm very lucky to have my crew. This the family when she flew. I've been knocked down, beat down, black and blue. She's not the one coming back for you. She's not the one coming back for you. If I fall back down, you're all over again. If I fall back down, you're gonna be my friend.
Some say the blast sounded like a bomb and felt like an earthquake.
Another day, another oil explosion, this time at Exxon refinery in California.
The intelligence assessment describes some anti-pipeline and anti-oil sands activists as violent extremists.
Anti-petroleum activists are a security threat, says Canada. January 2015, the second hottest January on record. Plus,
the best idea we ever had. Our belief that the country's most special places should belong not just to the rich, not just to the powerful, but belong to everybody.
President Obama designates 3 new national monuments.
All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Just one more day of oil in trouble.
Yep. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, earlier this week we reported there were 2 oil train derailments in North America. We need to issue a correction. In fact, there have been 3 in the past week.
Yes.
And just as I predicted, by the way, as the fire is still smoldering in West Virginia from that huge oil train explosion out there, Keystone XL pipeline proponents are once again claiming that this is why we need to build the pipeline. Here's Fox News, of course.
Proponents of Keystone XL say their pipeline would get oil to market cheaper and far safer than the trains.
Now, in fact, oil transport by train has exploded in this country, pardon the pun. Back in 2008, there was only about 10,000 train cars. Now, as of 2014, about 500,000 of these oil train cars are crisscrossing the country. So, wouldn't it be safer to build the pipeline?
No, you're right. Oil train traffic has increased 4,000%. But as far as total amount of oil spilled, pipelines still spill about 3 times more.
So even though shipment by oil bomb train has boomed over the past 6 years, as far as the environment goes, pipelines are still far more dangerous.
Overall, yeah.
Someone needs to tell Fox News. I'm sure they're waiting to hear it. And speaking of oil explosions, what do you have for us today, Desi?
Well, for the second time in a week, the oil industry was involved in a major explosion and fire near people's homes. The huge explosion on Wednesday destroyed sections of a 100-year-old Exxon refinery in Torrance, California.
How old?
107 years.
And it's still in operation.
Yes.
Giant flames visible for miles, the ground shaking, felt for miles as well. An explosion rocked this Torrance refinery, ripping apart structures and crushing cars.
Only minor injuries were reported. 13 schools near the refinery were ordered to shelter in place for several hours because what else are they going to do? Air quality was affected, but officials said it stayed within acceptable limits. The explosion measured the equivalent to a 1.7 earthquake on the Richter scale. The cause of the blast is still under investigation.
Here's the cause. Oil blows up. Just saying.
In Canada, a leaked intelligence memo from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police calls Indigenous tribes and environmentalists who oppose oil and gas development a growing threat to Canada's national security.
The intelligence assessment describes some anti-pipeline and anti-oil sands activists as violent extremists.
The January 2014 report lumps all groups against the oil industry together, describing them as a highly organized and well-financed anti-Canadian petroleum movement.
See, I knew you were a terrorist.
They call them anti-Canadian. Canada's Conservative Harper administration is currently pushing to expand broad anti-terror legislation to include anybody who interferes with, quote, critical infrastructure or the economic and financial stability of Canada, and even allows preventive detention of people who might do something.
It's long been said, when the U.S. sneezes, Canada catches a cold. It sounds like Canada has caught the flu. I'm sorry, Canada.
And disturbingly, that secret memo also questions the science on global warming.
Naturally.
Here in the U.S., the FBI is ramping up monitoring of anti-Keystone XL pipeline activists at their homes and workplaces.
Oh, hello, FBI.
Meanwhile, the planet is still warming. After 2014 clocked in as the hottest year on record, the month of January in 2015 was the second hottest January on record, according to NASA and NOAA.
Those liars.
President Obama this week used his executive authority to protect 3 new national monuments from development for all Americans: Browns Canyon National Monument in Colorado, Hanaolioli Internment Camp in Hawaii, and the Pullman Historic District of Chicago, prompting one congressional Republican to call him King Obama.
Of course he did. As Obama himself noted,
conservation is a truly American idea.
Yeah, back when we had Republicans like Teddy Roosevelt and, even Richard Nixon.
Yeah, back when conservatives actually believed in conservation.
For much more on those stories and all of them that we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, and iTunes, where we hope you will give us a good review, and that helps other people find our reports easier. Find us and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Is this land made for you and me? This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island. From the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
We need to stand united, for undivided we shall never fall. Remember all, we need to trust in and then forever call our brothers and our sisters. And are you and I are win? You and I both know that we can rely on it. The time is prime, planets aligned and no mistaken. For union resurrection, the anger has awakened. The sleeping giant, come on, yeah, we can do it. We need to revive, re-amp, and re-up the labor movement. Anything in life.
So I got an email on Saturday that said you need to look up Corinthians 15. And I'm going, what? Corinthians 15? What? I need to look up a biblical passage? So, I go to the web, I look up I'm looking up through the Bible sites of Corinthians 15, and it's, about the resurrection of Christ and the resurrection of the dead and all this stuff. And I'm going, this can't be. So I Googled Corinthians 15, and it came up with evidently there are 15 students, college-age students, who had taken out some pretty massive loans through the for-profit Corinthian college system. And you may remember me talking about this about a week and a half or 2 weeks ago about how Corinthian College is now being broken up because of their predatory practices and how they basically just screwed everybody, and how the government came in and gave them some relief on the private sector loans that they took out, but not on the guaranteed government student loans that they have to pay back. And I remember saying at the time, I wish they would say, I wish all of these students who go to these for-profit colleges whose degrees are worth nothing would say, screw you, we're not paying it. Well, the Corinthian 15, they're not paying it. And good for them, because they're saying, look, at the end of the day, you bailed out the private sector part of it. You need to help us. And I'm right there with them. Thank goodness. And I'm going to, over the next couple of days, we're going to reach out to these folks and try and find a couple of them to come and talk about why and all of the predatory practices that these companies do to get them in the door and their money. And then either no graduation or crummy degrees. Just amazing stuff. Anyway, what's going on here in Pennsylvania with our Department of Higher Education and the Pashi schools and all of this stuff is just, well, it's angering, which is why we've asked Editor Zero from the Raging Chicken Press, our good friend Kevin Mahoney. Kevin, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, great to be back. All better, no more flu, and here we go.
All right, I'm thrilled at the fact that you got these 15 students who are going, screw you, we're not paying it back. We didn't get anything for it. Our degrees are worthless. These places promised a whole bunch and gave us nothing. I'm thrilled with screw you.
Yeah, me too. I love to see that because, frankly, that's what it's going to take. And it's going to take those little steps of breaking through the fear into saying, you know what, this is just plain wrong. And I'm not standing for it. That's the only thing that's ever moved things in this country. The only time that we've ever seen progress is when people have said, you know what, I'm going to put aside the fear. I'm going to stand up for what's right. And I'm going to say, no way.
So tell me about this scheme that I'm hearing about. Is it the university presidents of the Pashi system who are proposing this, I guess, raising tuition without actually raising tuition kind of plot that they've going on? Explain it to me.
Yeah, I'm telling you, this is just another way of both politicians, the Board of Governors of the Pennsylvania State System of Higher Education, and the university president as to avoiding the hard questions about actually how do you make higher education affordable, by actually funding higher education. So instead of doing that, they're coming up with a series of schemes of how to raise tuition on the sly. And that's being done by the encouragement of the current Chancellor, Frank Brogan, Jeb Bush's number 2 from Florida, who's now our chancellor of our state system. And there's 2 schemes, one that's been around for a little bit, and one that is new and it's catching fire all throughout the state system. The first one has to do with charging fees for high-cost programs like nursing or lab sciences or electronic media and so on. So it's just in a way of adding on fees. And this is a longer story. We've seen this before,
sure,
where they're just going to jack up the fees on for-profit programs, or I'm sorry, high-cost programs are what they're calling them. Right? Now, what's interesting about this is that Brogan this is one of the first things that he encouraged university presidents to do. Instead of doing it just by, like at the Pashi system as a whole, they want to do individual by university. And so this is one of the first things that Brogan encouraged. And he said this was a way of, quote, raising revenue, right, and increasing student enrollment in STEM courses like science, technology, and engineering and math, right? Which works completely in the opposite direction. As his governor down there in Florida, Rick Scott, knows what Rick Scott did in the Florida system. He said, you know what, if we charge more money for these STEM programs, students are not going to want to go there. And that's actually what the former chancellor of Pashi said too as well. So it doesn't make sense that students should be choosing their degree based upon what they can afford. But Rick Scott, as a way of saying, well, if we want to drive people towards these STEM programs, let's charge humanities courses and humanities degrees more, because that'll drive students away from those degrees into the STEM programs. So they know that there's going to be effect. It doesn't even work to do what Brogan says it's going to do.
But I gotta be honest. I listen to this and I'm going, well, if you wanted people to go into the STEM program, shouldn't you be giving subsidies and all of this other stuff instead of making it more expensive? Because I start thinking technology fees, going into nursing, going into pre-med, going into any of these things. I guess you could fee them to death.
Oh, that's absolutely right. And I think that was exactly the concern of the previous chancellor, is saying, you can't do that. This is not a solution, because all it does is make students question whether or not they should go into these areas. And if we're trying to encourage them, we should incentivize those areas.
Just dumb.
Oh, it's absolutely dumb. The other scheme that's catching fire right now, it's already in place at IUP and Clarion, is to get students to pay per credit instead of a flat fee for tuition. And what this does is basically says, hey, you know what? Normally, if you're enrolled full-time and you take anywhere between 12 credits and 18 credits a semester, you're going to pay a flat fee for tuition, right? You know that you have to take 15 credits per semester in order to graduate in 4 years, right? But, you know, sometimes you have a bad semester, so you might drop a class, or you might want to take on a minor, so you increase your enrollment to 18 credits to make sure you get that extra minor, right? So there's some flexibility in terms of your course load each semester. What they want to do, instead of charging that flat fee, they want to charge students per credit. And on the surface, for, you know, the common sense rationale for it makes sense, right? You only pay for the credits that you take. But what this amounts to is basically, are you sitting down? Because this is incredible. PASHE has normally increased its tuition between 3 and 4% per year to keep up with inflation and keep those costs low. By paying per credit and to try to graduate in a 4-year degree, in 4 years, it would amount to between an 18% and a 25% tuition increase on students. This is unheard of in the PASHE system. And what PASHE wants to say, what the administrations, both at the university level, the university presidents who think this is a great way to raise revenue for the universities, and we're talking about a significant amount of money, everywhere between about $4 million to upwards of $8 million a year they're projecting to raise on the backs of students. And this is all being done without them having to announce from the rooftops that they're raising tuition by almost 20%.
Wow. So let me ask you this. I mean, the first thing that then pops into my head is, you know, the reason I think a lot of working class families send their kids to state schools is because it's really very affordable. Are you now moving toward a position where it's not nearly as affordable and you may actually lose students in the process?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that, you know, this is a long-term problem, of course, because, you know, as you know, and we've talked about this on the show too as well, and you've talked about this directly, is that this is basically a long-term result of state legislators refusing to fund higher education at the proper levels. Right. Since 1983, we've seen the tuition shift between 80 or 65% of the tuition coming from the state to now 75% of the tuition coming out of students' pockets. Right, so that's problem number one. There's a real problem in the cost, but the solution is not simply to lump more debt on students. The solution is actually to adequately fund this. And you're right, you get to a certain point and parents are going to begin questioning about whether or not PASHE is a good place to send their students.
And isn't that, to me, I mean, this sounds like creating that crisis so down the road you can go, look, we lost enrollment, now we got to privatize.
Yeah, it's about creating the crisis, and it's about disciplining faculty and staff too as well. Because basically, the local administrations, university presidents want to do this on the sly, like we were saying. And so I'll give you an example. At Kutztown University, where I teach, they have not gone to this model yet, but there's going to be a hearing on March 5th in which it's an open forum to talk about this. And they've already been making the rounds a variety of different faculty meetings. And at the faculty senate meeting, earlier, I think it was early in February, basically the Vice President of Administration and Finance came forward and said, yo, we need to go to this. And somebody asked the question, so, well, what if we don't think it's right? You know, what if we don't think that we should be increasing these kind of costs on students? And the response was the stick. The response was, well, we can go back to cutting faculty and programs.
Instead of what we all know needs to happen, you need to return the damn funding that you stole so that they gave out to all these corporate special interests and all of these tax breaks and the Delaware loophole and all this other stuff. Yeah, that's the right idea. Let's just beat the poor working people over the head. Nice.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And even something that's even more insidious, and this just throws me, is that what they're doing at each one of the universities where they're going to this scheme, they're providing students in the first 4 years with various names, kind of discounts, tuition discounts in your first 3 years, or tuition grants, for example, at Bloomsburg University, as a way of trying to stemming the tide of student outrage. So you just give them a little money in the first few years to soften the blow. So by the time it's in full effect, when there's no more tuition discounts anymore, the resistance is no longer there, because now it seems like just the natural way things are.
Yeah, that's... Well, I'm not so these people are smart. I mean, they're figuring out how to destroy everything my grandparents' generation built in this country.
Oh, that's absolutely right. You know, and I look at what's happening in Pennsylvania, and I know you were just talking about Wisconsin before, and I always think about Pennsylvania as kind of like Wisconsin on the sly, right? Always able to remain slightly below the radar. You know, the Republicans like to be able to don their moderate cloak to make sure that they don't seem too out there. But nonetheless, the effect of the policies that are being passed by this legislator and the former governor are virtually the same as what we see in Wisconsin. But the thing is that, you know, I think there's too many people still in this state who are kind of keeping their heads down and just hoping the storm will pass. When really the only thing that's going to change it is if we're going to stand up, we're going to actually kind of build this movement to fight this stuff back. I mean, at some point we got to say enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And I keep saying part of that is the union movement, but what we keep hearing the frame being, well, you know, it's just those lazy, dumb, uneducated people. They're the union people. It's not those educated people. No, they're too smart. But now I see that you're seeing a bunch of adjunct professors across the country going, hey, we want to unionize.
Yeah, you know what? I think step number one is actually having a lot of us to say, you know what? I don't care what you say. You can talk your jibber jabber about those smart people don't need unions. They can say whatever they're saying. We're just going to ignore them, and we're going to move forward with organization. So this week is this. It started out as the National Adjunct Walkout Day, which is going to be this Wednesday, which is now expanded to the National Adjunct Action Week. And earlier today at 11 o'clock, you had Temple University adjuncts marching in the streets out in front of their provost office demanding a vote for unionization. They've already cleared the first hurdle by applying for recognition through the Pennsylvania Labor Relations Board, and their provost has decided by himself that he knows what's better for those 1,300 adjuncts at Temple University. He doesn't think they need a union. Well, they disagree. Disagree.
Of course not. Why would they need such? They're smarter than that, right?
That's right. They're smart enough to know to ignore him and get out in the streets and keep on going with their organization.
See, what they should be doing is not worried about fighting for a union. They should go fight for a lottery to pay for higher education. That's what we need. We need an education lottery.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you know, I'm still waiting to see a picture of the provost of Temple sitting with Anthony Williams and in a charter school drinking their little lattes.
Drinking their if by 2 tea.
Yeah, exactly. And have a nice little K through 12 sticker on the side of their coffee mugs.
Yeah, but you look at this stuff, and while we can joke about it, the reality is the wealth class of this country has done a masterful job of working over the working class of this country and attempting to convince all of us that we can be like them.
Well, that's absolutely true, you know, and I think that it's going to take, like it's always taken, it's just going to take people standing up and saying enough. As I remember a couple of years back, not long after Wisconsin, you had Bruce Levine on the program, and I never forget that interview when he said, you know what, people have been demoralized and beaten down, but the solution is not simply only to say, here's how bad it is, but it's also to say, you know what, we're going to stand up and we're going to fight back, and you're going to see that you can win. Right. And that's what's happening with this adjunct movement. It's like we've seen, I mean, this is incredible. In the past year and a half, we've seen at least 30, like adjuncts at least 30 universities, colleges and universities across this country, right, elect to form a union. Right. That's unprecedented in the adjunct movement. And that's been going for a long time. I mean, adjuncts have been organizing at least since the 1990s. Right. And now you're seeing this huge uptick because people are standing up and saying, you know what? I've had my time in the shadows. I've had my time keeping my head down. I've had it with the fear. Enough is enough.
Enough is enough. If you want more information, you want to read more stories about this and other stuff, the ragingchickenpress.org is the website. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Editor Zero's name, Kevin Mahoney. Take you right there. Kevin, always great talking with you. Always great having you on the program. Keep up the fight. Keep up the great work.
Yeah, fantastic. I'll tell you what, I was getting cold, but I'm all warmed up now.
There you go. Our good friend, Kevin Mahoney. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
The bar's still open, but man, it's slow. The tip jar's light and the register's low. The bartender don't have much to say. The regular crowd gets thinner each day. Some are maxed out all their credit cards. Some are working 2 jobs and living in cars. Minimum wage won't pay for a roof, won't pay for a drink. If you gotta have proof, just try it yourself, Mr. CEO. See how far $5.15 an hour will go. Take a part-time job at one of your stores. I bet you can't make it here anymore.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in Two. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. 13 years ago today, the European Union imposed sanctions on a number of Zimbabwean leaders, including President Robert Mugabe.
In the early 2000s, like 2002, 2003, we had serious cases of abductions, disappearances, political violence, and organized violence.
Arthur Gwagwa is the international liaison of the Zimbabwe Human Rights NGO Forum. 3 presidential elections later, Mugabe is 90 years old and still in power, and those sanctions have essentially been lifted. But why? The situation in Zimbabwe isn't much better than it was 13 years back, but Mugabe has changed the tone of his rule. For instance, human rights groups can now operate in Zimbabwe and file court petitions, but they can't help organize demonstrations.
The right to freedom of association is useless unless it is accompanied by right to freedom of assembly. What the government is doing is not new, because a lot of governments or illiberal governments across the world, they are changing their tactics from overt violence to other overt forms of human rights violations.
Gwagwa says EU sanctions missed their target by putting a premium on symbols of democracy instead of true democratic reform.
They are never tired of holding elections. They hold elections. What they simply do is to make sure that the elections are zombie elections, to give a semblance of order to the outside world.
The EU renewed a travel ban and asset freeze on Mugabe and his wife today, but those are the only remaining elements of those sanctions. And with Mugabe recently selected as the chairman of the African Union, there's even a carve-out for his official travel. So instead of being ostracized by the rest of Africa, Mugabe's stock is high on a continent where Gwagwa says relationships are often more important than principles. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Where family values are more than slogans. The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. One of the things that gets me is, if you remember, well, a couple of weeks ago, there was some on the left criticizing Scott Walker for having dropped out of college, and I didn't get on. I didn't get on the bandwagon because look, I dropped out of college the first time, and the second time, but eventually went back, finished my degree, went on to get a master's degree. Just because someone drops out of college doesn't mean that they'll never go back. Doesn't mean that they're stupid. And I was a little uneasy by by some on the left to go after and criticize Walker, which I thought was a tactically a dumb thing. I didn't think it would go, and I guess I probably should have with the Fox News crowd. I'm not surprised, but I didn't actually think it would come to it, but I'm not surprised by it. It's now gone from defending Walker for having dropped out of college. It's now gone to mocking others who did. And evidently, according to the Weekly Standard, they pointed out that when Walker was on with Megyn Kelly on one of the fake news shows, Walker actually mocked Hillary Clinton, saying, she went to Yale, and then Walker come up with all the more reason to put in a fighter and not just an Ivy Leaguer, someone who's going to fight her, and went on this whole kind of thing. And Kelly chuckled. This was a response, as I say about my own Syracuse undergrad and Albany law school education. We can see items clearly because we don't have all the ivy on our eyes. Then it just kind of devolved into this, one, anti-Ivy Leaguer, kind of sentiment, and two, just kind of an anti-education kind of thing, which is where I just, kind of felt, are we promoting this kind of anti-education sentiment? And then it's a lot easier to defund things like higher ed. It's a lot easier to defund things like K through 12 education because we don't put as much value in it. I'm uncomfortable attacking him for not having a degree Because to be honest, some of the dumbest people I know have degrees, while some of the smartest people I know never finished 8th grade. So, I'm a little uncomfortable with it. So just a word to my friends on the left who might think about attacking him. I think it's a dumb thing. We should be encouraging people to get a good education, but not destroying people who can't afford to get an education. It just makes me uncomfortable. But again, I guess I'm not surprised, and nor should I be, that fake news on Fox along with Walker would then attack somebody who has a degree. Just I didn't see it going there. Quick break. Right back with hour 3. Stick around.
I'm a massive airstrike on a beautiful night. Yeah, it's my song I'm singing. Somebody better start counting. We're coming out swing.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. The Wisconsin AFL-CIO is calling for rallies at the state capitol in Madison Tuesday and Wednesday to protest more anti-union legislation. A bill attacking automatic paycheck deduction of union dues and union shops is being fast-tracked through the GOP-controlled legislature starting Tuesday. The so-called Right to Work bill bans contracts between private businesses and unions to deduct union dues from the paychecks of all workers covered by collective bargaining agreements. The Wisconsin Contractor Coalition, a group of more than 330 companies, is joining unions opposed to this attack on union funding. The coalition's Stephen Lyons says when union dues collections are reduced, it can hurt businesses that need trained and skilled workers.
Currently, members' dues are used to build training and state-of-the-art facilities. If you enact Right to Work, these are training facilities that may disappear. One of the coalition members are some of the road builders. I mean, we want safe bridges and safe roads. This is a coalition of private sector businesses working with private sector unions, and this is a situation that has worked for over 100 years. So I just think we're trying to fix something that's not broken.
In 2011, just before he attacked public sector worker union rights, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker was recorded telling right-wing Wisconsin billionaire Diane Hendricks that he would use divide and conquer to first go after public workers and then do right to work. That set off massive protests in 2011. During those protests, Walker took a call from a prankster he thought was billionaire David Koch. Here's the fake Koch chortling over Walker crushing public workers and Walker's response.
Well, I'll tell you what, Scott. Once you crush these bastards, I'll fly you out to Cali and really show you a good time.
All right, that would be outstanding.
In the WIN Sports Minute, Mitch Lawrence weighs in on NBA player trading.
So listen, 39 players moved to new teams. That amounted to a record for one day of trading in the NBA. Who won? Well, Miami and Detroit certainly improved their teams. The Heat, still smarting from LeBron James's departure for Cleveland last summer, scored a major coup by getting Goran Dragic out of Phoenix. The Pistons also upgraded their point guard spot with the addition of Reggie Jackson from Oklahoma City. And then there were the notable non-moves. Phil Jackson and the Knicks didn't get anything major accomplished, so there's still a lot of building to be done in New York, which has the worst record in the NBA. But here's all you need to remember from the busiest deadline day we've ever seen. The elite teams in the NBA stayed pat. Golden State, the leaders out west, did nothing. Memphis stayed the course, and the defending champion Spurs remained intact. Over in the East, the Hawks, Bulls, and LeBron's Cavaliers also stood back and watched the rest of the league revamp their rosters. In the end, all the trades didn't change the landscape. The best teams will still be the ones to beat when we start the playoffs in late April. From the Sports Minute for Workers Independent News, this is Mitch Lawrence.
This report made possible in part by the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Disorder in the house. There's a flaw in the system. And the fly in the oil, and when the storm bring the whole thing down.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So Rick Scott, the governor of Florida, on a job-stealing junket to Philadelphia today. I understand he's here for, I guess, today and tomorrow, touting the the race to the bottom, low taxes. Here's a whole bunch of handouts. Whatever it is that they've got to offer. Because look, we're 50th in job creation. I don't know why you would come here, but it just is what it is. But I've asked our good friend, Dr. Stephen Herzenberg, Executive Director of the Keystone Research Center, to come talk to us and find out maybe a little bit about the big junket. Steve, thanks for taking time for us.
Happy to, Rick. Good to talk to you.
So the Governor Skeletor is in Philadelphia to steal jobs, huh?
He's selling Gator Oil in Philadelphia. Yeah. I don't think in the end he's going to get many takers.
But I thought it's all about the taxes. You know, they've got evidently have lower taxes than we do, right? It's all about the taxes. Isn't that what we're told?
That's certainly what he's selling. He happens to have his facts wrong. Not that you know, don't let the facts get in the way of a good story. But he's actually even his basic premise that business taxes are much lower in Florida turns out to be wrong. That if you look at something called COST, the Council on State Taxation, which is an association basically of Fortune 500 type companies. And so that's really the Bible in terms of, you know, you're figuring out where to locate and you know, if you care about taxes a lot, that's where you'll get numbers you can trust. And
okay.
Yeah.
So in this cost publication, we can find out that Pennsylvania has the highest taxes in the free world.
No, we actually don't. We actually don't. This is one of the misconceptions about Pennsylvania business taxes. Whether it's a good or bad thing, you know, we can argue with after that. But on the facts, we actually don't have high business taxes.
Wait a minute. But I hear the people at the Tea Party think tank, and I hear the right wing crazies going, high taxes, we're gonna die. It's killing us.
So they and Governor Rick Scott share something in common, which is a misunderstanding of the fact. No, I mean Pennsylvania has we have this one really high tax rate, the sort of corporate income tax rate, right. But as nobody pays that rate. And then we actually have other parts of the tax system in Pennsylvania, like business property taxes, manufacturing plant and equipment, partly reflecting the fact that this has historically been a strong manufacturing state. You don't pay property taxes as a business on that in Pennsylvania. You do in many other states, I think, including Florida. So anyway, so on his facts, he's selling something that's wrong. Maybe the more important point is the basic approach he's selling is bankrupt. I mean, the idea that the way to grow your state is by stealing jobs from another state is, first of all, it's wrong again. If you look at numbers of where state job growth comes from, it all comes from the growth of companies who are already in your state or startups in your state. Basically, the movement of companies from one state to another is a wash.
So you're saying beggar thy neighbor is not a good economic development plan.
Well, it doesn't work. It's not where jobs come from. Growing your own is where jobs come from. Now it's bankrupt in a second sense, not just in the sense that it doesn't work. It's bankrupt because part of what it does do is bankrupt states and localities. So if you play the war between the states, if you energetically engage in the kind of behavior that Governor Scott is involved in today in Philadelphia, where you're bribing companies, once in a while you'll land a big fish, or again, a lot of times what you'll do is give a big check to a company that was moving to your state anyway.
Right.
And so that's a waste of taxpayer resources. So if you play that game a lot and you put another state under pressure to, get their governor or their mayor to play this same, give companies a check to move or not to move, then lo and behold, you slash your revenues. So you can't invest in education, you can't invest in skills, you can't invest in infrastructure or innovation. Lo and behold, you've undermined the foundation of a strong economy long term.
Right. Lo and behold, you've got Kansas and Missouri.
Yeah, and to some degree, Florida. I mean, Florida. One of the things we found out, sort of looking at the numbers because of Scott's trip, is Florida is doing better than Pennsylvania on job growth. No, that's got something to do with having a faster growing population. Maybe something to do with the weather. But where Florida really stinks on Governor Scott's watch is wage growth. They're 49th their median wage, that mythical worker in the middle of the wage distribution, has seen their wages go down $1 an hour since 2000, a bit more than $1 an hour since 2010.
Well, isn't that good for business? I mean, doesn't that make business go, yes, that's where we want to go?
Well, it's not really good. I mean, it's not businesses. A lot of successful business understand actually that paying your workers very poorly is not really the way to get good workers, to keep good workers. So, I mean, sort of all it really shows is, if you think of what Florida is doing as a classic Southern strategy, as a classic low-wage strategy, on that level, it's kind of working. It's a low-wage strategy. Oh, look, it's driving down their wages. So this is not a direction, that Pennsylvania wants to go in, that Philadelphia wants to go in. Again, I think there's enough people. There's a local businessman from Harrisburg, Doug Nedick, who just had a nice piece published in the Philadelphia Daily News, which makes some of these key points. So again, I think there are enough people pointing out that Governor Scott is misguided on his facts and on his strategy, that hopefully, he actually wants to go back home.
Yeah, well, I got to tell you, as cold as it's been, he probably wants to go home anyway. But, this is a good time to have that kind of a talk. Hey, come down to Florida because isn't it cold? I mean, that's a better selling point than I think that we have a horrible education system.
Right. Well, in Miami, our biggest city, may disappear into the ocean at some point, in the next several decades. Again, certainly helped by Governor Scott, given that he's struggling to come to terms with the climate change science. So even though as Florida is clearly one of the states that's better be worried and preparing for climate change. So So I mean, the other reason that's come out in some of these stories that Governor Scott might want to get out of town is because he's facing a series of corruption investigations that Salon magazine referred to as a corruption spiral. So again, but going back to the substance of his trip, he's selling something that doesn't that's inaccurate, and also that's not going to help his state. Again, the good thing is that Pennsylvania, to some extent, rejected in November, rejected a strategy that's a little bit like this, that's all about cutting and austerity and not investing in education. So we're now, our new governor, Tom Wolf, will put out his first budget next week, and I think that's going to be the beginnings of the fleshing out of a strategy that's much more based on an investment agenda and strengthening the foundation of long-term growth.
Yeah, but I look at Florida, and Florida is one of those two America states, though. I mean, you talk about the tax system benefiting the very wealthy and being very costly to the very poor. They have hugely regressive taxes that punish the poorest people in their state, and I guess that's a way to go.
Absolutely,
I'm not fond of it, but it's one way straight to the bottom of the barrel, which is where like you pointed out, 49th in wage growth, actually losing $1.07 an hour over the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. There's something wrong there. Yeah,
there's something wrong with that. No, you're exactly right in terms of Florida being one of the most skewed states in terms of the distribution of income. The top 1% takes home a bit over 30% in Florida. I think they're third in terms of the top 1% share. And then you are exactly right. Florida's tax system, we've got the sixth worst, but I think they've got the second worst, so that the bottom fifth pays 7 times as much of as big a share of its income in taxes as the top 1%. So again, and that's a recipe. We'll be putting a piece out in Pennsylvania and actually Florida in the next couple of days. But when you've got all your income flowing to the top and you tax your top folks at really tiny rates, that's a problem for your state budget. No wonder you've got a structural deficit. You can't invest in, education and infrastructure because you've chosen not to tax the people who are getting all the money.
But shouldn't this be a conversation for us to start going, well, you know what? People keep jobs here and move here for a couple reasons: education, infrastructure, location, those things. Shouldn't we be considering, strengthening education, strengthening our investment in technology and broadband access here and other things so that we would keep our employers? And then maybe here's an idea: steal some from Rick Scott in Florida.
Well, steal the companies from Florida that want to connect to Pennsylvania's research universities, that want to capitalize on the fact that we're very close to half the population of the United States. So I think that's exactly what we should be talking about. Again, this what we're talking about now is closer to the kind of approach that was outlined in the Fresh Start Plan candidate, Tom Wolf's plan. So, and again, he as a central Pennsylvania businessman and actually a distribution company business, he totally understands the importance of infrastructure. Getting your supplies to your factory, getting your goods to market. So, I mean, he talked a lot about all the things we're talking about in this conversation: investing in education and skills. Talked a lot about capitalizing on Pennsylvania's strategic location. By not cheaping out on, but by investing in our infrastructure. And he also talked a lot about investing in innovation and capitalizing on, the fact that we've got the third most colleges and universities of any state in the country after California and New York. So an investment agenda where you're looking at your strengths and say, we're going to bolster our strengths. We're going to, like a good business, like the business he ran, we're going to invest in the future, in technology, in our workers. We're going to become more productive. We're going to improve quality and service. We're going to get, our goods to our customers, with a shorter turnaround time. So again, that's the new direction that Pennsylvania is, about to start debating in a much more serious way, and hopefully pursuing in a much more serious way. And again, that's why in the end we think that Pennsylvania doesn't have much to worry about from Governor Scott, because what he's selling, maybe some of the businesses you don't want would buy, but Pennsylvania's got a lot of great businesses that really, value good workers and proximity to market and good universities, and so let's build on our strengths, which we haven't done, for the last period of time, but let's start to do that.
Yeah, I like your frame, Gator Oil. That's good. But the thing is it's the difference in thought, competing on the positive things as opposed to competing on the negative things, competing on, as you pointed out, education and infrastructure and all those positive things, instead of what Scott's peddling, which are cheap wages and exploitable workforces and all of that stuff.
Exactly right. And again, I think when people step back and they kind of realize you want to take the same strategy as, I don't know, Guatemala, or do you want to take the same strategy as Germany or Denmark? Then again, people grasp that you actually want to invest and you need to spend money to make money. Or you need to do that as an individual business, but as a state, you need to spend money to make money.
There you go.
So again, hopefully we'll get a refreshing, an honest, and sensible discussion. Our side, sometimes we give ourselves an out by saying that our approach or strategy is more complicated than cut taxes, shrink government, deregulate, weaken worker rights, but et cetera, right? I'm not sure that's true. I mean, I think in the end, some of us, and I would certainly be guilty of this, make what we're talking about harder to follow than it needs to be.
Right, but at the end of it, Steve, I still believe it's easier to destroy a house than it is to build a house. And that's
Well,
the difference. That's the difference here. I mean, you've got people who are destroyers. They want to deregulate. They want to destroy wages. They want to destroy working conditions. They want to take the low road. It's easier to go down the slide than it is to climb back up.
Well, so yeah. So if you
get the analogy,
if you can break, well, fair enough. If you can break politics at the national level or at the state level, if you can break politics so that it's impossible to get the revenues to invest in the future, so that you're cutting government, so government doesn't work, right? So I mean, sure, you can. We do face some of those challenges. I don't think fundamentally, if there was goodwill in all quarters, and we weren't, dealing with the Koch brothers, for example, that moving in the right direction, isn't impossible, isn't all that difficult. But no, you're right that if there are people who are like Grover Norquist, what was the phrase? Strangling government in the bathtub. If there are people who are dead set on doing that, on incapacitating government. I mean, there's one of the other bills that people are talking about in Harrisburg now is a bill that limits the growth of spending. So, again, that phrase, you got to spend money to make money. So people dead set on sort of making it maybe impossible for us to spend the right amounts of money on education and skills and so on. Then fair enough. Going in the right direction with a strong middle class and rising living standards and environmental sustainability, may be hard. But hey, next few years, we'll take a shot at it.
There you go. Steve, I appreciate you taking time for us.
All right.
Thanks for giving us a little bit of information on this.
Sure.
Our good friend, Stephen Herzenberg, Dr. Herzenberg, Executive Director there at the Keystone Research Center, KeystoneResearchCenter.org, the website. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Steve's name, take you right there. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We're in a fight to bring the middle class back, and we ain't even planning on losing in this mighty war. The working class is under attack. Get up, fight on. Stand up, fight on. Yes, we can fight on. To the death, fight on. Get up, fight on. Stand up, fight on. Yes, we can fight on.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1940, and in a hotel room in New York City, Woody Guthrie penned the original lyrics of his song, This Land Is Your Land. The song was not recorded at Folkway Records until 4 years later. Born in Oklahoma, Guthrie crisscrossed the United States, writing songs about the struggles of working people and the poverty he observed. He became one of the most important social commentators of his day. One of Woody's best-known songs, This Land Is Your Land, was a response or a retort to Irving Berlin's God Bless America. That popular tune crowded the airwaves in the 1930s, and Guthrie felt Berlin's song did not adequately capture the experience of the common man. He felt it ignored the discrepancies in wealth and opportunity he observed in his travels. Guthrie sarcastically called his new song, God Bless America, for me, before renaming it This Land Is Your Land. Guthrie's original recording included these lyrics.
There was a big high wall there that tried to stop me. Sign was painted, said private property, but on the back side it didn't say nothing. This land was made for you and me.
But the studio didn't release this version of the song. During the late 40s and 1950s, artists were often censored for anything that could be labeled as having a communist undertone. The song, including its more radical verses, became a staple for folk singers, especially Pete Seeger. It remains a favorite song at labor rallies to this day. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and the Rick Smith Show.
Your land, and this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you and me.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
At the beginning of the 21st century, the world's most dominant form of conflict and aggression became terrorism. Terrorism is a method of attack that can be used as a means to several different ends. Terrorism is a violent surprise that generally kills innocent non-combatants or non-warring armies. Its basic use is to make a statement such as, "Do as we want or we'll do this again, but you won't know where until it happens." Terrorism's goals can be to scare into submission, to wear down until surrender, or to simply overtake territory by destroying a population. Over the long haul, terrorism has been proven to fail more often than not. Terrorist acts tend to fail because those being attacked stand up to the fear and often organize their own counterattack that is more powerful. Join us again to learn that terrorism is not a recently developed tactic. This is Clint Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. EPI study out points out that the stagnant wages we saw in 2014, part of a 35-year trend. Yeah, gee, tell me about it. In fact, I would say not stagnant, but I would argue actually declining. And, you've seen this wage stagnation, as they point out in the report, since 2007. Wages for American workers are flat and actually falling. According to the study, they point out that the poor performance of American workers' wages in recent decades, particularly their failure to grow at anywhere near the pace of overall productivity, is the country's central economic challenge. The report says raising wages is the key to addressing middle-class income stagnation, rising income inequality, and lagging economic mobility, and is essential to moving families out of poverty. And look, the reality is, and we're just having this conversation today at lunch, where we're never, and I've talked about this in the past, I don't know that we'll ever see the 1970s. I think about my grandparents. My grandparents bought their house in the mid-60s. I believe they paid $18,000 for it. A nice little suburb house, little bungalow. That they were, the Levittown ideas, where they paid a contractor to come in and build a whole community with government money. The private sector with government money, of course. And my grandfather was in the military, got him a VA loan, and all of that stuff. He was paying like $143 a month. And this is the mid 60s, and $143 a month at the time was, it was like paying a mortgage. By the end of the 1970s, just a little over a decade later, that $143 was a day's pay because you had inflation. And the inflation of the 70s went up rather quickly. They said, well, it was hyperinflation. It wasn't hyper. We weren't talking about 1,000% increases, but you had some high inflation. But you know what happened? Along with the high inflation came higher wages. Yeah, because wages and productivity were tied together. And, where they like to say that, and this is where the right wing, and get ready for this, because this is coming. The right wing is now saying the reason that you had the stagflation and the inflation in the 1970s is because of one, inflation. You had the inflation, and two, because of taking us off the gold standard. both they're going to pin on, of course, Jimmy Carter. It was Nixon who took us off the gold standard because he pretty much had to. And, Carter ended up taking Paul Volcker, who had this obsession with inflation. And we have, since the 1970s, we've had this obsession with keeping inflation very low. And that truly is part of the reason why we haven't had the wage increases. But understand, you wouldn't have had the wage increases in the 1970s without a strong labor movement. And I was talking this afternoon about my grandfather, who was a Teamster during those years, who a number of years got 2 and 3 raises during the year because the contracts that they had, the people who negotiated and were smart enough to go, we're going to have inflation. We should have an adjuster in that contract. If inflation goes up this much, we get a percentage bump in our paycheck so wages keep up with inflation. That, my friends, is the reason you had rising wages, because workers had the bargaining power and the contractual legal right to do so. Republicans right now are trying to undo that entire infrastructure and destroy the whole thing so that you don't get those wage increases. They learned from the 1970s. Honestly and truthfully, they learned. They didn't want to give decent wages and benefits and all. They don't. It's about putting more. And I got to tell you, when does the working class of this country wake up and realize that the corporate masters don't give a rat's behind about you? Oh, but my boss cares. No, they don't. A couple of weeks ago, I had a conversation with a guy who was telling me, well, the company told me I had to go out on 8.5 hours rest. Understand, the law says you have to have 10 hours off. I said, but I doctored my logbook, so it looks okay. I'm going, you don't think that somebody can read the GPS and know that you only had 8.5 hours off? Well, the company told me to do it. I go, you think they're going to stand and say, I told you? You're going to be sitting in jail. Maybe they pay a fine. And I got to tell you, at some point, we as a population have got to start thinking. Just thinking. I don't care about what. Just thinking about something. Amazing. Just wow. We got work to do, folks. Quick break. Right back.
But it only brought more money to their hands. And the more keep getting poor, people turn away, not able to admit the way they planned. It's taking all the soul away from everything they grew, and they can't have the link on which to stand.
Uncovering the con and conservatism. Rick Smith.
Some say the blast sounded like a bomb and felt like an earthquake.
Another day, another oil explosion, this time at Exxon refinery in California.
The intelligence assessment describes some anti-pipeline and anti-oil sands activists as violent extremists.
Anti-petroleum activists are a security threat, says Canada. January 2015, the second hottest January on record, plus
The best idea we ever had. Our belief that the country's most special places should belong not just to the rich, not just to the powerful, but belong to everybody.
President Obama designates 3 new national monuments.
All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Just one more day of oil in trouble.
Yep. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, earlier this week we reported there were 2 oil train derailments in North America. We need to issue a correction. In fact, there have been 3 in the past week.
Yes.
And just as I predicted, by the way, as the fire is still smoldering in West Virginia from that huge oil train explosion out there, Keystone XL pipeline proponents are once again claiming that this is why we need to build the pipeline. Here's Fox News, of course.
Proponents of Keystone XL say their pipeline would get oil to market cheaper and far safer than the trains.
Now, in fact, oil transport by train has exploded in this country, pardon the pun. Back in 2008, there was only about 10,000 train cars. Now, as of 2014, about 500,000 of these oil train cars are crisscrossing the country. So, wouldn't it be safer to build the pipeline?
No, you're right. Oil train traffic has increased 4,000%. But as far as total amount of oil spilled, pipelines still spill about 3 times more.
So even though shipment by oil bomb train has boomed over the past 6 years, as far as the environment goes, pipelines are still far more dangerous.
Overall, yeah.
Someone needs to tell Fox News. I'm sure they're waiting to hear it. And speaking of oil explosions, what do you have for us today, Desi?
Well, for the second time in a week, the oil industry was involved in a major explosion and fire near people's homes. A huge explosion on Wednesday destroyed sections of a 100-year-old Exxon refinery in Torrance, California.
How old?
107 years.
And it's still in operation.
Yes.
Giant flames visible for miles, the ground shaking felt for miles as well. An explosion rocked this Torrance refinery, ripping apart structures and crushing cars.
Only minor injuries were reported. 13 schools near the refinery were ordered to shelter in place for several hours because what else are they going to do? Air quality was affected, but officials said it stayed within acceptable limits. The explosion measured the equivalent to a 1.7 earthquake on the Richter scale. The cause of the blast is still under investigation.
Here's the cause. Oil blows up. Just saying.
In Canada, a leaked intelligence memo from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police calls Indigenous tribes and environmentalists who oppose oil and gas development a growing threat to Canada's national security.
The intelligence assessment describes some anti-pipeline and anti-oil sands activists as violent extremists.
The January 2014 report lumps all groups against the oil industry together, describing them as a highly organized and well-financed anti-Canadian petroleum movement.
See, I knew you were a terrorist.
They called them anti-Canadian. Canada's Conservative Harper administration is currently pushing to expand broad anti-terror legislation to include anybody who interferes with, quote, critical infrastructure or the economic and financial stability of Canada, and even allows preventive detention of people who might do something.
It's long been said when the U.S. sneezes, Canada catches a cold. It sounds like Canada has caught the flu. I'm sorry, Canada.
And disturbingly, that secret memo also questions the science on global warming.
Naturally.
Here in the U.S., the FBI is ramping up monitoring of anti-Keystone XL pipeline activists at their homes and workplaces.
Oh, hello, FBI.
Meanwhile, the planet is still warming. After 2014 clocked in as the hottest year on record, the month of January in 2015 was the second hottest January on record, according to NASA and NOAA.
Those liars.
President Obama this week used his executive authority to protect 3 new national monuments from development for all Americans. Browns Canyon National Monument in Colorado, Hanaolioli Internment Camp in Hawaii, and the Pullman Historic District of Chicago, prompting one congressional Republican to call him King Obama.
Of course he did. As Obama himself noted,
conservation is a truly American idea.
Yeah, back when we had Republicans like Teddy Roosevelt and, even Richard Nixon.
Yeah, back when conservatives actually believed in conservation.
For much more on those stories and all of them that we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, and iTunes, where we hope you will give us a good review, and that helps other people find our reports easier. Find us and follow us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Is this land made for you and me? This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island. From the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. If you missed it this afternoon, my state representative, Stephen Bloom, had a little get-together downtown there in Harrisburg at Stock's Restaurant there on 2nd Street. Just a little donation, the state rep, just a little donation from average, everyday working folks, people, good folks, living on the cheese and macaroni. Just $300 to get in the door. That's all. A meager $300 to have lunch with your state rep. That's our guy in the pockets of the wealth class, doing their bidding, pushing for the paycheck destruction, pushing for the no rights at work agenda and more tax breaks, all that stuff. So yeah, just $300. You could have sat right next, rubbed elbows with him. Just $300. Sad stuff. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world in Washington, D.C. Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. Justin, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, great to be here. Frankly, I never really understood the idea of paying to have lunch or dinner with a politician. It makes sense if you're trying to court a special favor or whatnot, but, I've hung out with some of these people, and they're not the most fun or interesting, conversation partners.
Especially that guy. I mean, there's nothing interesting about him whatsoever. Just nothing. He should pay me to have lunch with him.
There we go. Yeah, that's how I feel about it. Actually, I'm not going to name names, but I sat next to a former governor at one point who may be running for president in 2016, and we were with Jeff Bridges, and even that didn't really make it a cool event to be with him. But yeah, I've kind of
Well, they won the popularity contest, man. That didn't mean they had brains. They just won the contest.
Bingo.
Sad stuff. Let's find out what's going on. So we shutting down the Department of Homeland Security. Are we all going to die? Did the terrorists win?
Yeah, I mean, we are all going to die eventually, but at this point, it looks like it's going to be much sooner since the terrorists are winning here. The Senate right now, as we speak, is holding its fourth vote on moving forward with the bill to fund the Department of Homeland Security. This also includes a measure to defund the executive action put forward by the Obama administration. We have until February 27th to receive congressional action before the funds run out, and we'll have a number, about 300,000, DHS personnel who are going to essentially be furloughed. Some additional ones who are going to be going without pay, and this is a pretty, big deal as the administration is putting forward, considering this has. This is coming at a time when, DHS is being fairly reliant on when it comes to, and ensuring domestic threats don't arise. Right now, there doesn't necessarily seem to be a way forward for Congress. This is probably going to be resulting in a filibuster today in the Senate. Senate Democrats have not signaled that they're going to be changing their tune on this. Meanwhile, in the House, Speaker John Boehner has maintained that he is not going to be moving forward to the clean funding bill. And right now, there are people who are discussing the only way to move forward would be to split the bill to essentially send to the House, a plan where they would approve a typical funding measure, while also waiting to hold a separate vote on defunding DHS. That's something that a lot of conservatives have sort of balked at, saying that they want to make this part of the fight. So it doesn't look like there's any clear, easy solution in this one.
So as I understand, this is correct me, help me understand. Because we as a nation, we just can't fund the things that we're told are keeping us safe. We've got the Republicans who are basically holding us hostage and our safety hostage because they have an ideological difference on the immigration stuff. Am I getting this right? My personal safety is their ideological fight.
That's frankly pretty much what this is. This was a clean request from the administration. Typically, we don't have additional, language to strip executive actions, particularly when they are, coming in the sort of heat of the moment time. So this is something that was sort of a choice by Congress, and frankly, it doesn't look like there's any clear way forward that would make any sense. We've seen from the White House that this is something that they are not going to be changing on. They've signaled that there's a distinct possibility that they may not even sign a short-term bill. So this is a pretty dangerous times, and one in which Republicans are again not yielding even in the face of a major shutdown.
Yeah, this is a pretty major game of chicken. Because now, as I understand it, the people who, if we do have this quote unquote shutdown, not everybody who's guarding the borders and guarding our airports and all of that stuff, not all of them are going to be sent home, right? They're just going to get to work for free.
Exactly. Lucky tons.
Yeah, because they don't have mortgages and kids and they don't have bills to pay, right?
Yeah, and actually, this is what Obama talked about today during his address to the meeting of governors at the White House. He put forward the case that this is actually going to have a pretty big economic impact at the state level. These are a lot of people who are going to be affected by this. This is going to be money that's going to be taken out of their paychecks, and therefore is going to be taken out of local economies, and also has additional risks beyond just the national security implications.
Nice.
Just for the economic well-being of the U.S.
Well, I guess there's one thing that I can say that they didn't say that we have to repeal Obamacare. Because actually today, my Capitol reporter was tweeted back to me that evidently they want to sell the state wine and spirit shops here, the liquor stores, and the reason that they're doing it is now because of Obamacare. And so, everything has become because of Obamacare, and I'm surprised that hasn't come up in this fight either. Or has it?
Not yet, but this is still the early days of the Mitch McConnell, John Boehner, leadership duo.
Touche.
I'm sure we'll see plenty of time for gamesmanship to come up in here.
All right.
And again, it really is worth noting that this is like the first, or maybe second significant push from the Republican leadership, and it's probably going to effectively lead to a shutdown. And again, this is within the first, 2 months of them being in office. So that, it's probably a pretty good preview for how the rest of the, 2 years are going to look.
Yeah. Well, are you surprised? Because at the end of this only helps the Republicans' message, which is government doesn't work, because we're going to make sure it doesn't.
No, that's a very good point. And that's something that they seemed particularly keen to drive home here. And it's also worth noting that they, at this point, sort of realize that they're going to be the ones who are going to face the blame for this ultimately. We've had, a number of polls that have shown that this is going to fall on Congress's, lap. We've had a number of GOPers expressing frustration that they are ultimately going to be the ones who are going to receive blame for this. But nevertheless, that has not altered the, strategy and the Republican circle.
Never underestimate the ignorance of the American voter is what I keep thinking, because Scott Walker got elected 3 times. And people, I'm surprised he's going to push the no rights at work agenda. I'm shocked. Somebody needs to smack that person. Let's move on. I guess Walker was in D.C. Today was the big governors meeting, right?
Yeah, exactly. The president today addressed the National Governors Association. This was something that was attended by, Christie. This was attended by Greg Abbott in Texas, and as you mentioned, Scott Walker in Wisconsin. Of course, this came with a lot of political scenery. These are the governors who are obviously running for 2016, and a number of which are also kind of staying in town today to hold an additional number of fundraisers and appear at CPAC later this week. But this was grounds for the president to reiterate his comments on the importance of funding the Department of Homeland Security, while also noting the elephant in the room, which is that these are huge political rivals for the Democratic Party.
Oh, Crazy PAC! I can't wait for Crazy PAC.
I can. It's fun the first few years. It's sort of like a comic book convention, except without
the comics, without the funnies,
without the entertainment. There we go.
No, I hear you. And finally, the Department of Justice is looking to implement the executive order by Obama on the immigration reform.
Exactly. They today have filed for an emergency stay against the federal judge from Texas's ruling that has effectively put a hold on the executive action on immigration reform that was set to go into effect a number of days ago. While doing this, they have also filed a request for a formal appeals process, saying that the judge, in fact, did not have the jurisdiction to order this, since this affected a number of states outside of its initial jurisdiction. So that's what's moving forward right now. We're still going to be waiting to see how that actually goes. If it moves forward, it looks like the administration is going to carry out their plan to defer deportations for a good number of undocumented immigrants. But nevertheless, this is leading up to what's likely going to be a big federal fight in the long run.
Yeah, well, more fun. Yay. And it still blows my mind. We can't get something passed that I think everybody agrees needs to be funded. I think most people I talk to think, we should be funding the Department of Homeland Security. I'm not a huge fan of the department, but even I think you should fund the damn thing. If you're going to have it, you should fund it. It should have the adequate tools to do what you've said it needs to do. And I'm completely against the idea of forcing people to work for free.
No, that's a very good point, and this is something that's incredibly disappointing, especially considering even with both parties in power right now, they don't really have the leadership ability to move forward, and that's frustrating at the end of the day. This isn't just Republicans versus Democrats. This is Republicans against themselves, considering that there is a extremely hostile conservative majority in the House who is dead set against letting anything reasonable move forward, and that's really poisoning the well at this point. Sad stuff. Justin, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thank you. Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. And you want to check out their website, talkradionews.com is the website, talkradionews.com. We've got links at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in Two. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. 13 years ago today, the European Union imposed sanctions on a number of Zimbabwean leaders, including President Robert Mugabe.
In the early 2000s, like 2002, 2003, we had serious cases of abductions, disappearances, political violence, and organized violence.
Arthur Gwagwa is the international liaison of the Zimbabwe Human Rights NGO Forum. 3 presidential elections later, Mugabe is 90 years old and still in power, and those sanctions have essentially been lifted. But why? The situation in Zimbabwe isn't much better than it was 13 years back, but Mugabe has changed the tone of his rule. For instance, human rights groups can now operate in Zimbabwe and file court petitions, but they can't help organize demonstrations.
The right to freedom of association is useless unless it is accompanied by right to freedom of assembly. What the government is doing is not new, because a lot of governments or illiberal governments across the world, they are changing their tactics from overt violence to other overt forms of human rights violations.
Gwagwa says EU sanctions miss their target by putting a premium on symbols of democracy instead of true democratic reform.
They are never tired of holding elections. They hold elections. What they simply do is to make sure that the elections are zombie elections to give a semblance of order to the outside world.
The EU renewed a travel ban and asset freeze on Mugabe and his wife today, but those are the only remaining elements of those sanctions. And with Mugabe recently selected as the chairman of the African Union, there's even a carve-out for his official travel. So instead of being ostracized by the rest of Africa, Mugabe's stock is high on a continent where Gwagwa says relationships are often more important than principles. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Good news, people. The boom is back. Good times are here again, thanks to an economic boom generated by, of all things, bad times. Tens of millions of Americans have been knocked down and held down in recent years by the collapse of jobs and wages. This calamity has led to a second blow for millions of the same families who now find themselves buried in overdue bills for credit card charges, student loans, and other consumer debt. But there's a bright silver lining in that dark financial cloud. Only it's not for the indebted families, but for a booming breed of finance hucksters known as consumer debt buyers. Believe it or not, in the warped world of high finance, there's gold in them thar hills of bad debt. Such miners of human misery as Encore Capital Group buy bales of unpaid bills from banks and other lenders, paying pennies on the dollar. Then they unleash packs of their hard-nosed, aggressive collectors on the families. If they still can't extract payment, the debt profiteers turn to their meanest dog, the courts. Debt firms routinely file thousands of lawsuits a day against financially devastated Americans. They know that most debtors can't understand the legal gibberish in the suits, can't afford a lawyer, and can't mount an effective defense against the corporate lawyers. So, some 95% of these lawsuits produce default judgments against hapless borrowers. meaning debt buyers can then confiscate the wages of borrowers or freeze their bank accounts. This is Jim Hightower saying this boom in vulture capitalism is disgusting. But worse, it's subsidized by us taxpayers. We pay for that judicial system, the judges, courtrooms, and endless rounds of hearings. Predatory debt corporations have perverted our so-called justice system into their own subsidiary for squeezing profits out of destitute debtors.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
No matter how hard you try, you can't stop us now.
The proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
Since the prehistoric ages and the days of ancient Greece, right down to the Middle Ages, planet Earth kept going through changes. And then the Renaissance came, and times continue to change. Nothing stayed the same, but there were always renegades. Like Chief Sitting Bull, Tom Paine, and Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, they were renegades. Of their time and age, so why they renegades?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind. You can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. George sent me an email a couple of breaks back when I was talking about inflation. And he says, Rick, I lived through the 1970s, and you are absolutely correct. Wages have kept up with the price increases during the 70s, and actually wages outpaced the price increases, leading to a higher standard of living. He says that he remembers buying his house and paying 12, almost 13% interest on the mortgage that he had back in the late 1970s, and that they were happy to get the mortgage. Because look, at the end of it, wages were keeping up with, and in the dirty word against inflation is that it erodes people's standards of living. If you have a wage structure that keeps up with, or even maybe just a little bit ahead of, then everyone does better. That's the reality. And what inflation's good for, and the reason why we'll never see that generation like my grandparents, it was massive wealth. The debtored property class, which is why the baby boomers have it really pretty decent. Their homes that they bought for, in the teens and in the $20,000, $30,000 range are now worth, the house my grandparents paid $18,000 for in their lifetime is now about $125,000, $130,000 house. I stop and think about the house that I bought, I think it was $170,000. I don't know that I'm going to see that $170,000. I'll stop and think about this for a second. $18,000, you're talking about it was about 8 times. I don't expect, my house to be worth $1 million in my lifetime. I just don't. And it was that massive wealth creation that my house will appreciate a little bit, but not 8 times. And that's what people, are looking for. You stop thinking about the wealth created during that era and the debtored wealth that it created, that debtors took on, debt and then paid it off rather quickly because it was a joke by the end. Literally, my grandparents made in a day what their mortgage for the month was. I don't know that many people are going to be able to do that going forward. I mean, I know people with $1,000 mortgages. I don't see them in one day making $1,000. Wages have not kept up. Now, understand, the reality is, had wages kept up with inflation, we'd be much further down the road and have a much more robust economy and a stronger working class. But what we've got, and what we've had for the last 30 years and 40 years, is this assault on workers and their rights, the assault on organized labor and collective bargaining. And even if you don't have the union card in your wallet like I do, and even if you're not a member of a union, that's what raises wages. They bring wages up. And guess who comes with them? Yeah, there's those stragglers, those people who don't pay into unions and aren't members of unions. They get a bump as well. And this is where I think the non-union crowd and the people who don't have the ability to join unions have lost the reality. And the reality is if those guys are making a decent wage, you're probably going to get a little bit better bump. And you're not going to be even with them, but you'll be close because that employer's going to go, well, I don't want them to be union, so we're going to pay them a little bit better. Not as good as those guys got it, but a little bit better. And you have this rising up, which is why at the height of union density in this country, it was only 35%, over a third of the workforce. But we had a massive burgeoning middle class. Why? Because those 35% had an equal 35% that they pulled up. And you didn't have as large of a wealth class. You had people who were well off. They trust me, there were rich people, but they weren't obscenely, oh my God, are you kidding me kind of rich. The kind of wealth that, 40 generations from now, they'll be going, great grandpappy made a widget and didn't pay any tax, and now I get to not do anything. It's that's not how it was. Understand, the Rockefellers are still very wealthy, but John D. Rockefeller, the guy who paid the first estate tax, paid 70%. Yet they're still wealthy. It is what it is. Lots to do this week. Tune in tomorrow. Thanks for being here. See you tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@theshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's coming.